The story begins with a huge traffic jam in the city streets. A sign informs that the road ahead is closed, and it would be kind if everyone changed their routes. Traffic was at a standstill, but the green lights start to appear. At that moment, Ming-hee appears speeding on his motorcycle. He realizes that he passed 2 signals, and both turned green as he approached. Although happy about it, he is also frustrated that he has such a good ability, but he can't use it in battle. He clenches his teeth, upset about this. He continues on his way, and every signal he passes turns green, thus clearing the way for him. Ming-hee then closes his eyes and continues on his way. Earlier that same day, the super admission test conference for the academy was taking place. A man announces that all those students passed the written test, so now they will test their extraordinary talents. The examiner shows a crystal that will be responsible for classifying each student into which rank they will be placed. He explains that there are 5 possible ranks, from lowest to highest: white dust, blue spirit, purple soul, red honor, and black saint. All students position themselves in front of the crystal to be evaluated. He then looks to the side and sees a beautiful girl smiling at him, wishing him good luck. The examiner then asks everyone to touch their respective crystals and warns in advance that the academy only accepts students who achieve at least the blue spirit rank. In other words, anyone classified as white dust, which is the lowest rank, will not be approved. He then places his hand on the crystal, full of confidence, but he is frustrated to see the result that came out. His rank was classified as white dust, so he was not accepted. The protagonist then looks to the side to see the results of the other students and realizes that 4 of the students got the blue spirit rank and 1 student got the purple soul rank. Only Ming-hee got white dust, which is indeed the worst possible rank. The other students watch the test results from afar. Some students start mocking Ming-hee, saying that he is part of a small number of people with an extraordinary talent, which is white dust. They say it is an invisible talent. Another student also mocks him, asking what Mr. White Dust said earlier about getting the highest rank. Ming-hee continued at that moment, unable to believe that he had gotten the lowest possible rank, while most students mocked him. One of the students even says that, how will Ming-hee confess to the most beautiful girl on campus now, since he got the white dust rank, while Luquan got the purple soul rank. Luquan is sad to see all the students making fun of Ming-hee, and also sad that he was not approved in the academy because of the white dust rank. Back to the present, Ming-hee continues his motorcycle journey, dodging all the trucks along the way, imagining that luck is a damn thing. Throughout his journey, he drives at full speed, while imagining that power is completely useless. The protagonist then becomes serious, and imagines how he will face the monsters that appear with this power, knowing that these monsters could easily destroy a building. Ming-hee then, still sad, just continues his way. He then, still riding his motorcycle, passes under some giant bones. Ming-hee then looks up and sees something shining in the sky. He looks more closely to understand what it was, and realizes that the shine in the sky was a comet, which by the way approached so much that it was passing close to him. Ming-hee gives a slight smile and thinks that not even bullets can hit him because of the luck he has. So what are the chances of a comet hitting him in such a big world like that? He then, driving at full speed, begins to realize that the shine of that comet was getting brighter and brighter, indicating that it was getting closer and closer to him. He then can't believe it, looking towards the comet. His eyes widened as he watched the comet, which by that moment was just a few meters away from him. The comet then hits Ming-hee directly, causing huge destruction at the site. A huge dust cloud rises at the impact site of that comet. The dust gradually dissipates until we see Ming-hee lying in the middle of all that dust, while a bubble begins to fly towards him. It was a bubble with a different aspect, shining brightly. This bubble then goes to Ming-hee's chest and begins to enter his body. This bubble was like a system that was viewing Ming-hee's stats. The system then discovers that Ming-hee's extraordinary power is luck, and that his devour attribute is ineffective, and his parasite attribute is ineffective. Basically, Ming-hee only had the luck attribute at maximum, while his other attributes were 0. A goddess then appears inside this bubble, carefully evaluating all of Ming-hee's information. The goddess's system identifies that enemies are approaching. The best choice then was to identify a host, and after that, coexist with him. The goddess then opens the protagonist's soul while the integration was being completed. Now she delves deeper into his knowledge. The goddess then realizes that this host has no fighting abilities, so he would easily die in combat. That said, the goddess grants him extraordinary combat powers. Ming-hee then feels a powerful energy overflowing through his hands. He then clenches his fist with huge energy overflowing throughout his body, He has just gained the mysterious dark fists. The goddess's system now begins to assess the protagonist's talent rank. A mysterious red energy begins to envelop Ming-Hee's entire body. His talent rank is now Red Honor. The goddess then gives a slight smile while seeing all the energy that the protagonist has just received and says that, at least now, he can be considered a fighter. Some time passes, and we see a heart rate monitor. Ming-Hee is unconscious with an oxygen mask. Ming-Hee is lying with several wires connected to his body. One of the doctors informs the nurse that Ming-Hee's body is in good condition, but unfortunately, because of the trauma he had, he will probably be in a coma for a long time. The nurse asks the doctor to rest assured that she will take very good care of him. At this moment, a nurse opens the door calling for Dr. Zhao. She tells him that an astronomy group sent a small sample of the comet's blood in the hope that it could help them test it. The doctor then says it's okay, and everyone leaves the room, leaving Ming-Hee resting alone in that dark room. Some days pass, and a girl brings flowers to Ming-Hee, who is still in a coma. It was Luquan, holding the flowers, sad to see Ming-Hee in that situation, and she was also holding a letter. A month then passes, and the group of students who mocked Ming-Hee in the evaluation visit him in the hospital. One of the students regrets, saying that all he wanted to be was extraordinary. Another student mocks, saying that Ming-Hee took the teasing too seriously. The blonde student asks why Ming-Hee took it personally, since even with emotions running high, he should be more cautious. The blonde student then looks to the side and notices something. He sees that bouquet of flowers and that there was a pink letter in it. He decides to take the letter to see what was inside, while another student says that Ming-Hee needs to get better soon so he can look for a good job, since hospital bills are usually very expensive, and he even heard that Ming-Hee's sister is in several jobs to be able to pay these bills. The blonde student then takes the letter in his hands and realizes that the letter came from Luquan, and that she even responded to Ming-Hee's confession. The blonde student is frustrated, imagining how a beautiful girl like her responded to the confession of a jerk like Ming-Hee, especially since it's hard to say if he will really come out of that coma. The student then, with a terrifying look, takes and tears the entire letter, so if Ming-Hee comes out of the coma, he will never know that he once received it. 1 year passes, and the city remains as calm as ever. Suddenly, a noise comes from the sewers. A huge hand starts to lift the sewer lid to get out. A gigantic cockroach climbs to the surface. At that moment, the city sirens start to wail, announcing that a huge number of mutants have emerged in the city on the southwest side, and the entire population needs to evacuate urgently. The hospital sirens then start to wail. All doctors and nurses panic, as the sirens are not a good sign. All nurses, doctors, and patients start running desperately towards the exit, while one of the nurses runs in the opposite direction. The security guard, also desperate, shouts for Dr. Zhao to flee immediately. The doctor is completely shocked by the situation. The nurse who ran in the opposite direction of the exit keeps running with all her might. She is extremely worried, as one of the students is in a coma in room 409, and he was left behind. She thinks that even if he never wakes up again, he should not be left behind in that way, with so many monsters invading the hospital. She then heads to Ming-Hee's room, and at that moment, one of the giant cockroaches appears on the ceiling right behind her. She then opens the door to the room, desperate with the whole situation. Ming-Hee was still with his eyes closed. The nurse then grabs Ming-Hee's arm and shakes it in hopes of waking him up so that both can escape from there. At that moment, she is startled when she looks ahead. She then sees, through the window's reflection, that one of the giant cockroaches was behind her. She is completely terrified as the giant cockroach licks her face with its tongue. The nurse is in shock while still holding Ming-Hee's arm. The cockroach is clinging to her, saying how delicious that nurse must be. At that moment, Ming-Hee clenches his fists tightly and delivers a powerful punch to the cockroach, causing a huge explosion at the location. Ming-Hee remains with his eyes closed. Now he is awake, full of energy, as he removes all those cables connected to his body, his fist still overflowing with energy after that punch to the mutant cockroach. The protagonist then looks seriously at the nurse. At that very moment, a huge horde of giant cockroaches was climbing the hospital, when a huge explosion was caused by Ming-Hee's punch. Ming-Hee's punch completely destroyed the top part of the cockroach, and it also destroyed 3 layers of walls of the hospital. The nurse is crouched down, scared by everything. The rest of the cockroach then kneels and falls to the ground lifeless, while Ming-Hee stands tall, full of energy. The nurse was already crying a lot at that moment, scared of the cockroach, but Ming-Hee asks her not to worry, as the mutant cockroach was already dead. He then extends his hand and asks if the nurse can stand up. Ming He takes the opportunity to thank Nurse Song for taking care of him for so long while he was unconscious. Nurse Song then sits on the bed still scared and thanks Ming He for saving her, and even asks when he woke up. Ming He then changes the subject, asking if they were not in Nanchang Hospital, and he also asks how so many mutant cockroaches ended up there. Nurse Song then says that the superiors informed that contaminated fluid entered the sewers, and after that, numerous mutant parasites appeared throughout the city. Ming He then asks what happened to the people living near the hospital. The nurse, still in tears, replies that probably the population is being evacuated to a safe place. The nurse also says that she does not know more details, as she was worried about Ming He and ended up running towards his room, separating from the others. Nurse Song also says that she was very worried that a mutant cockroach had reached Ming He's room and was trying to devour him. Ming He then smiles, thanking the nurse for not abandoning him. The nurse, still worried, says she was just doing her job as a nurse, but she still had a doubt if he was just a student or not. After all, how could a student like him kill a mutant cockroach of that size with just one punch? Ming He then becomes embarrassed and starts to think that he trained combat techniques for a whole year. Nurse Song is confused to see him with that expression. Ming He then says they should hurry and get out of there to the evacuation group. At that moment, the hospital was already completely infested with mutant cockroaches. He then starts walking towards one of the walls that broke from his punch. He sees numerous mutant cockroaches in that corridor. Ming He then asks Nurse Song to please wait there for a moment. The mutant cockroaches, hungry, rush towards Ming He as soon as they spot him. Ming He then becomes serious, clenches his fist tightly, and waits for the cockroaches to get closer to him. And when they get close enough, he delivers a powerful punch that disintegrates several cockroaches at once. The cockroaches that were not hit become afraid of that enormous power. However, Ming He starts running at full speed towards them, delivering a strong punch to the face of one cockroach, and to another mutant cockroach, his punch makes a hole in its belly. As he approaches another mutant cockroach, he gathers energy in his fist and delivers a punch that completely disintegrates the cockroach's belly, splitting it in half. Ming He then is startled to look back and see Nurse Song screaming because one of the cockroaches was flying towards her. Ming He then sees a pot with a green liquid on the table. He then runs to the table and punches it, making all the objects fly. He looks at the pot and reads that the green liquid is sulfuric acid. Ming He then punches the flask, destroying it and making the sulfuric acid fly onto his fist, making the acid completely surround his hand. At that moment, the cockroach was already close to devouring the nurse, so Ming He yells "Acid Fist" and completely explodes the cockroach's head with his wind blast mixed with sulfuric acid. Ming He, at that moment, has an intense green glow in his hand after breaking the sulfuric acid on it. Ming He then starts looking at his fist with that green glow and thinks that he practiced this technique countless times in his head, but he had never tested if it really would work. The nurse is surprised to see that and asks if Ming He's superpower is directly related to his fist. Ming He then becomes embarrassed, saying that he was still a student who even failed the exam he had last year. Nurse Song can't believe it, asking if the examiners are blind. After all, with all that power he demonstrated so far, he could be considered a rank pyro superhuman at least. Ming He, upon hearing this, remembers the day of the exam when he took the test and got white dust as a rank. Ming He then looks at that place and asks how the cockroaches got so scared like that. After all, what fluid was able to leave them like that? The nurse then replies that, to make matters worse, there are not only cockroaches in the sewers, so there will probably be other different mutant monsters. The protagonist then becomes worried and asks if there might not be more sulfuric acid around there, as it would be very useful. After that, still in the city, a bus was calmly traveling until two giant eyes appear under the bridge. Then, the bridge is destroyed right in front of the bus. The people inside the bus become desperate with what that could be. The entire bridge in front of the bus begins to collapse. The passengers panic when they see what was coming from below and start screaming that they were giant cockroaches. All the passengers start to panic. One of the passengers, also in panic, calls emergency services saying that a surreal number of monsters appeared on Nanchang Bridge and that he urgently requested support from superhumans. When one of the cockroaches was almost devouring people, a bullet goes through its head. The people then look outside and see smoke coming from a gun and also see a shiny emblem on the person's clothes. A superhuman gunslinger had just arrived to help them. The people then, completely frightened, look through the broken bus window and see that cockroach dead from the shot. The gunslinger then asks everyone to calm down, that he was a rank pyro superhuman, and he would take care of all those disgusting cockroaches. The gunslinger is then surrounded by several cockroaches, but he manages to shoot all of them in the head, while saying that no matter how many of them come at him, after all, his superpower is infinite ammunition. That said, all those cockroaches would go to hell. A cockroach then gets very close to the gunslinger, but he takes a huge leap, and from up high, he starts shooting non-stop with his pistols, hitting the head of all the cockroaches. The gunslinger then falls back onto the bus, since he had finished off all the cockroaches that were close by. However, he is startled to feel a horrifying presence behind him. The gunslinger then turns around and realizes he was facing a giant rat, extremely larger than all those cockroaches. Then, an explosion is caused on top of the bus where the two were. The bus passengers were in shock at that scene. They were facing that giant rat while it completely devoured the gunslinger's body. Panic only increased among them as all they could scream for was help. Returning then to the hospital, Nurse Song and Ming He are sneaking away from that place. The nurse still asks if they were followed by the monsters. Ming He replies that probably not, since no mutant cockroach attacked them so far. The nurse then gets scared looking ahead and sees the city bridge destroyed. The nurse then, worried, says that looking from there it seems like she's seeing the last bus that left the hospital right where the bridge is broken, so probably the people are in danger. At that moment, a phone near them rings, informing that there is an incident in the city of Nancheng. The phone also informs that a giant mutant rat appeared on the bridge, and that apparently the rank pyro superhuman, Twin Guns, is no longer alive. Ming, he then crouches down and picks up that phone while it still rings, saying that no registered superhuman is near the location. Ming, he then, picking up the phone, asks please to give him all the information about that giant rat, such as its powers, strength, and weakness. The phone then informs that the giant rat is weak against fire, but right after saying that, they ask who is the person speaking to them on the phone, if that person was even a superhuman. Ming, he then replies that he was just a student who failed the entrance exam for the superhuman school. The phone then starts shouting, asking if he is an idiot by any chance, since that demonic giant rat is a general rank monster. So, why was Ming He asking for that information, since he can't do anything about it? Ming He then starts walking, while the phone keeps shouting, saying that theoretical knowledge is useless, so Ming He should urgently seek shelter. Ming He then, with a serious look, says that the hospital staff took care of him for a year while he was unconscious, so Ming He cannot let them die that way. The giant rat, at that moment, was holding the huge bus in its hands. The giant rat then approaches with a demonic look while seeing the desperation of all the passengers. Ming He and Nurse Song watch from afar what that rat was doing and conclude that it was just playing with its prey. Ming He then stands up and asks Nurse Song to hide and not to leave there, no matter what happens. The nurse, also worried about him, asks if he really was going to confront the demonic rat. After all, he could be killed by the rat. Ming He then fixes his gaze on the nurse and smiles, asking if when a patient is in danger, the nurses just stand still and do nothing. Just as the nurses ran to help, Ming He will also do the same. The nurse then looks worriedly at Ming He, imagining that the worst could happen. Ming He then clenches his fist tightly and runs towards the giant rat, saying that he won't know the result if he doesn't try. The rat, which was devouring the bus, doesn't notice Ming He approaching, and then receives a powerful punch that makes it stop biting the bus immediately. Ming He, concerned about the situation he is in, thinks that an ordinary cockroach is the size of a thumb, and after mutation, they became the size of a human being. Ming He then starts to look at the giant rat's paws and says that the mutation of that rat was on another level. The mutation made the demonic rat grow to the size of a building. Still worried, Ming He imagines that with a giant body like that, if by chance its claws hit him head-on, they would probably cut through to the bones, tearing him apart. If that happens, Ming He won't be able to save those people anymore. The demonic rat then attacks Ming He with everything it has, who manages to dodge while thinking that rats by nature are extremely agile, so this would be a problem. The rat then runs, opening its mouth trying to devour Ming He whole. Ming He keeps running away while thinking that he cannot let the demonic rat even touch him, not even once. Ming He continues running away as fast as he can, imagining that he needs to get as far away from the bus as possible so that the rat follows him, and the people are not in danger. The giant rat then tries to bite Ming He when he was on top of a car, but Ming He jumps at high speed, causing the giant rat to bite a car that was in its way. Ming He takes advantage of the fact that the monster's mouth was busy biting that car and sees an opening to attack. Ming He then punches the air, sending a powerful purple energy towards the giant rat. This energy hits the demonic rat with full force, causing a huge explosion. Ming-He then looks ahead after the explosion dissipates and realizes that the demonic rat was lying on the ground after the impact. Ming-He looks at the closed eyes of the giant rat and wonders if the rat fainted after receiving that powerful blow. Ming-He then starts walking towards the giant rat, wondering if he should deliver the final blow at that moment. As he walked towards the giant rat, he began to think that he should still be wary, since animals like rats are clever and tend to play dead to get out of a tight situation. Right after Ming-He thinks this, the rat opens its terrifying eyes. The rat then splits the car it was biting in half while tossing another car into the air with its enormous strength. The demonic rat then begins to destroy the entire area, causing Ming-He to need to run at full speed to escape from that heap of cars falling from the sky, while still needing to flee from that giant rat with a thirst for blood. Ming-He, as he flees, begins to think that he was not in a good situation. Apparently only the strength of his fists will not be enough to kill a general rank monster like that giant rat. Ming-He then looks at an overturned car and sees its gasoline spilled on the ground. He then focuses and has a brilliant idea. Ming-He then starts running next to a red car. The frenzied demonic rat destroys this car while Ming-He changes direction, going to the opposite side. Ming-He was running in zigzag while the demonic rat followed him at all costs, trying to devour him. There comes a moment when the giant rat stops its pursuit while drooling heavily, wanting to devour Ming-He. The demonic rat stopped because Ming-He also stopped running. Ming-He had lured the giant rat to that huge puddle of gasoline. The giant rat just stands there, not understanding why Ming-He was standing still there. Ming-He then, with a confident look, takes out a lighter and throws it on the ground. At that moment, Nurse Song approaches the bus and asks Dr. Lin if everyone there is okay. Dr. Lin sees that it is Nurse Song and says he is glad to see that she is okay. Dr. Lin then says that he doesn't know if he hit his head or something, but he was seeing a superhuman fighting the demonic rat, and this superhuman is wearing the hospital patient's clothes. Is he imagining things? Said Dr. Lin. At that moment, the lighter Ming-He threw on the ground hits the gasoline leaking from the car, and immediately causes a huge explosion that was seen by everyone near the bus. The fire was getting higher and higher. The demonic rat was completely on fire. The demonic rat tried desperately to put out the fire that covered its entire body except its head. The despair of the demonic rat was expressive. Ming-He thinks that he did well to remember that during his conversation on the phone a little while ago, they informed that the weakness of the demonic rat was fire. Ming-He then puts his arm into the flames, saying that that intense fire will be part of his strength at that moment, and the flames will help him gain more power. Ming-He then, with his fists on fire, says that a filthy monster that lives in the sewers dared to come up to the city and had the audacity to hurt people. That filthy rat will now feel the taste of his fists, said Ming-He, while the demonic rat is completely panicked with nowhere to run since there was fire everywhere. Ming-He then attacks the demonic rat with his flaming fist. Ming-He is full of confidence, while the demonic rat is completely desperate. The people on the bus are surprised by everything they are witnessing. Ming-He then shouts, "Fist of the burning flames," and completely disintegrates the demonic rat, as well as creates a huge trail of destruction with the impact of his blow. A nurse who witnessed all that starts shouting that Ming-He really managed to kill that demonic rat, and finally, everyone was safe. This same nurse, while shouting, asks if the boy who defeated the giant rat is indeed a high-ranking superhuman, and if so, why is he wearing hospital patient clothes from the hospital where they work? Another nurse asks if it wasn't the student who was in a coma in room 409 for a year. This nurse says she doesn't remember his name very well. At that moment, Nurse Song smiles and says that his name is Ming-He, and that he is a student who was rejected in the entrance exam of the superhuman school. Ming-He, at that moment, was overflowing with confidence after defeating the giant rat. After all this, we now move to the command post. A general contacts Lucian, saying that it is no longer necessary for her to go to the site, as that general-ranked monster has been killed. Lucian then stops moving, saying that the news was great, as probably everyone is okay with the monster dead. The barracks general replies that yes, someone went to the site and helped everyone by defeating the giant rat. Lucian then asks who was responsible for killing the general-ranked giant rat. She would like to personally thank the person who managed to kill it. The barracks general, who by the way has a wonderful body, replies that she has no information about the person responsible for such an achievement, as it seems that it was an unregistered superhuman, and probably not the rude student she has in mind. That said, probably another strong superhuman must have run there to help. The barracks general still asks if they can't find the source of that contamination yet. If they don't find it soon, she fears that in the future, there will be many more creatures like that one. So at the moment, all that can be done is to evacuate everyone in Nanchung and only then quarantine the affected areas. After the fight, everyone went to the rescue station. Nurse Song is tending to Ming-hee's arm wounds, commenting that he was amazing and that without a doubt if it weren't for him, the people on the bus would not have survived. Ming-hee then smiles shyly after hearing that. At that moment, a girl approaches the guards, shouting that her brother is still inside the hospital in a coma. The guard informs her that, unfortunately, he cannot let her in as the area is isolated. The guard then explains that they have already evacuated and quarantined Nancheng Hospital. At that moment, only superhumans are authorized to enter as it was very dangerous. The girl, crying, says she doesn't care about any of that, as her brother is there and she needs to save him. The girl, still desperate, pleads with the guard to let her in, saying her brother is just a poor kid, still only a teenager, who had to live in a coma for a whole year in a hospital. She says he's still unconscious and hasn't woken up yet. He just watches her saying all that. The girl, still crying heavily, says her brother's name is Ming-hee and that he's a good boy, so she doesn't believe anything bad could have happened to him, especially since he's so young. She tells the guard that Ming-hee hasn't even held a girl's hand until now, so if he dies now it would be too sad. Ming-hee, beside her, remains shocked hearing all that from his sister. The girl, then desperate, puts her hands on her head and asks her brother to wait for her, that she will save him. She takes a deep breath and says she will save Ming-hee, even if it costs her her life, and if he dies, she will die with him. Ming-hee, beside her watching all that drama, can't believe it. Ming-hee then stands up and walks to his sister. She looks at him closely to make sure she isn't seeing things, and then jumps into his chest, grabbing him and screaming happily that he finally woke up. She, emotional, shouts that, as the older sister, she was very worried about him. She then, with a tearful voice, says it was great. Simply great. He looks sad looking at her and starts to remember last year, his sister helping him in the hospital, adjusting the devices he was intubated with. She even took his hand and said she finally found another job, since now she'll have to work at night too, and because of that, she won't be able to visit him regularly. She, still crying, tells him not to worry, that even if he never wakes up again, she will always visit him for the rest of her life, even if she gets so old that she needs a cane to walk. Ming-hee then hugs his sister tightly and apologizes for making her worry, but now he's awake. He then looks at his sister crying and thanks her for the hard work she gave him that year. She starts to cry even more. Ming-hee then goes back to his apartment. He just woke up. Ming-hee thinks he should rest in his bed, as it's been a long time since he slept in his house. He then looks at the bedside table and sees breakfast prepared, along with a letter his sister wrote, saying she has already gone to work, as the hospital bills were not fully paid. She also says that because of this, she won't be able to spend as much time with him, but he should stay home and rest until he finally recovers. Ming-hee, sitting on his bed, thinks he didn't know the hospital bills would be so high in just a year. Ming-hee starts to reflect that his sister is working 3 jobs, and that because of that, she looks paler than a patient. Ming-hee, while eating his breakfast, thinks that now he needs to make a lot of money to give his sister a better life, so she won't have to work so much. Ming-hee then turns around and hears on the television that the government is offering a reward of 50 million yuan to anyone who has at least a clue about the source of the polluted fluid that created those mutant monsters. Ming-hee then runs in front of the television and says that's exactly what he's looking for. The report also says that for now, each mutant cockroach taken down will have a reward of 3,000, and the giant demonic rat is worth at least 5 million. Ming-hee continues to eat his breakfast while saying that apparently this issue has not been resolved yet, and so they are giving away a lot of money just for some information about the source of the pollution. At least with that, he will be able to pay all the hospital bills, and there will still be money left over for him to buy a new house for him and his sister to live in. He also thinks that on top of all that, there will still be money left over to buy a lot of clothes and makeup for his sister. Ming-hee then starts to remember the mutant cockroach and wonders where the source of that polluted fluid might be. He then remembers the fight against the demonic rat and imagines he will have to investigate further to check on it. Even if he doesn't find any evidence of the source of the polluted fluid, he can at least go defeat the mutant monsters, gaining combat experience and collecting the reward from the government. Ming-hee then decides to go to the rewards hall. Upon arriving, he is greeted by a girl who thanks him for his visit and informs him that the place is the rewards hall. With a smile on her face, the girl asks if he is there to make a request or if he is a superhuman. Ming-hee then responds that he is a superhuman. The girl says she understands and asks what his rank is. She will assign a mission according to his level. Ming-hee explains that he just wants to kill some mutant cockroaches to earn the rewards, so he would like to know how to find out if his rank is high enough to do that. The girl then shows him a badge and says she will give it to him, which is an indication of being a superhuman, but there are many conditions for it. Initially, he would need to show at least some basic superpower. The girl then continues her explanation, saying that if he really wants to be ranked up to the point of becoming a starlight rank, he will have to go through several very complicated exams. Ming-hee then smiles and asks her to take him to the training center. He then arrives at the training center. There he finds several people doing strength tests. The girl then asks what kind of superpower he has. Ming-hee simply replies that his powers are his fists. The girl then asks him to look at the robot that will be used to test him. The robot is very resistant, so he can hit it with all the force he has. After punching, the robot will give him a value of how strong that punch was. Ming-hee then looks at the robot's face and realizes there is a value on the screen showing 800 kilograms. After seeing that, Ming-hee begins to deduce that probably 800 kilograms is the minimum he needs to reach to fit into the necessary standards for approval. He then starts to move his fist, saying he's not sure if he will be able to do it or not, but either way, he will do his best. Ming-hee then positions himself while still thinking that, whether he likes it or not, he was in a coma for a whole year, so probably his muscles have not fully recovered yet. Ming-hee then prepares himself while gathering strength in his fist and throws a punch with all his strength at the robot, causing a huge blast of wind around his fist. Everyone around realizes that was quite a punch, as the sound was so loud that it caught everyone's attention. Ming-hee, seeing all that smoke coming out, asks how much he scored. The exam girl is shocked to see that. The robot had been damaged where he punched it. Even a piece of the robot's chest fell off. The scoreboard on the robot shows it was a punch equivalent to 1,000 kilograms. Ming-hee, without much expression, sees that it was 1,000 kilograms and thinks he at least managed enough to be approved. Other people who were in the place doing the test enter despair, saying, "Just enough to be approved?" The man explains that he just broke the test's record. The girl who guided him to take that exam explains that the 800 kilograms he had seen was the result left by the Iron Fist that debuted recently. So now he has just broken that record. Ming-hee then feels embarrassed hearing that. He then goes back to the reception of that hall. There the girl gives him a card and explains that it is a small prize for breaking the record. It was a 1,000 yuan shopping card. The girl also explains that if he breaks other records during the exams, he can receive even more rewards. Ming-hee then asks her what types of ranks they have there. The girl explains that in that hall, they deal with Starlight rank, Moonlight rank, Solar Ray rank, and Paradise Light rank. She explains that if his rank is higher than one of those four, he should go somewhere else. Ming-hee then becomes pensive, looking at the card, and then smiles. He gets excited, imagining that he's heard that when someone reaches the Paradise Light rank, that person can buy a mansion and a luxury car. He's not sure if it's true or not, but for now, he decides he needs to focus on getting stronger and impressing everyone. He then walks to the place where the hunt for rewards will take place and wonders if all those people were there trying to recruit other members for their groups. He walks among the people and didn't imagine there were so many people interested in those rewards, and he had never seen so many superhumans together like that before. At that moment, a man with a giant headset approaches Ming-hee and asks if he's alone. If so, he asks if he would like to join the Crimson Eagles. Ming-hee turns around and asks if they are all there to find more members for their groups. The man with the headset, named Luo, replies that obviously yes. After all, they were going to a dangerous place. Also, if a person goes alone and is caught by the monsters, no one will know. He also explains that officials do not allow users below the Solar Ray rank to enter alone to hunt monsters. Ming-hee says he understands. Luo then asks Ming-hee what his rank is and if he could show his badge. Ming-hee then shows his badge. Luo then, with a mocking expression, asks if it's serious that Ming-hee is just a Starlight rank intern. Luo apologizes, but his group doesn't recruit any beginners. Luo starts to move away while telling Ming-hee that he advises him to go back and train a little more, as he is a Starlight rank intern, and entering to hunt those monsters with that rank is asking to die. Ming-hee then puts his hand on his head, wondering if no one would want to ally with him because his rank is too low. At that moment, a girl spots him. This girl asks her group if that person standing there isn't Ming-hee from their class. The guy standing says it's true. It seems that Ming-hee really is there. The guy with blue hair, named Jung, starts laughing, saying that a group just dismissed Ming-hee, and if he heard correctly, They even said they didn't want to deal with newcomers. Lin then stands up and shouts for Ming-hee. Ming-hee approaches the group, and then Lin asks when he was discharged. After all, they heard he was in a coma. Ming-hee replies that it's been a while. Xinghong then asks what Ming-hee was doing there. Ming-hee says he was there to hunt mutant monsters to earn good money and pay medical expenses. Zheng, mocking him, says that someone with a weak physique like his should worry about not being devoured by the monsters. And being as weak as Ming-hee, thinking of hunting them? Lin, worried about Ming-hee, says it's very dangerous and asks him not to take such a big risk, especially because, as she remembers, his ability was not made for combat. Zheng, still mocking, says he remembers that Ming-hee's ability was luck, so what use would that have? Basically, he'll buy a bottle of water, and the clerk will say, "Congratulations, you won another one." Lin then gets angry and tells Zheng to stop joking. After all, Ming-hee just left the hospital and he's trying hard. So, as old classmates, it's their duty to help him. Lin then asks Ming-hee to join their group, and they will protect him. Ming-hee, happy, says yes. Ming-hee still thinks that the officials prohibited him from entering alone, so he would be forced to join a group anyway. Ming-hee then observes that group, imagining that they still look down on him as always. However, that group entered the Institute of Superhumans over a year ago, so they probably became very strong. Ming-hee then looks at the last member of the group, Xiao Dan, and imagines that everyone in that group must still look at him as that poor guy, a rejected person who was paralyzed for a year. Xinghong then says that Ming-hee's ability is luck, right? So maybe he'll bring luck to the whole group, so it would be interesting to have him as a kind of mascot for the group. Xiao Dan says they were classmates, so they should just let him into the group. Lin says that's right, that classmates should help each other. They then begin to walk through the city streets, while Lin says they all studied at the Institute of Superhumans for a year. She also tells that the institute requires each student to participate in extracurricular activities at least once, so they all decided to come back this summer to help deal with the pollution incident. Ming-hee then takes the opportunity to ask about Luo Qian, asking if she isn't with them. Zheng, once again mocking, asks if he's still thinking about her. He replies that Luo Qian is now a celebrity at the institute, so why would she want to work with low-level former classmates? Lin recounts that Luo Qian became incredibly strong, and none of them could catch up to her. She heard that Luo Qian returned to the city of Lanyang to help the officials in the search for the source of the pollution. Lin remembers that Ming-hee had perfect grades in humanities, so she takes the opportunity to ask what he thinks the source of the pollution might be. As the group walked, there were many eyes watching them from the sewers. Zheng, upon hearing Lin, asks what's the point of having perfect grades if without combat ability, he would never be accepted into the institute, and they were there hunting mutant cockroaches. Zheng also says how they, who are just students, could have a task like finding the source of the pollution. He continues pensive at that moment, imagining that according to the reports, there were 3 types of mutant monsters: the mutant cockroach, the mutant larvae, and the mutant rats. He begins to think about the sewers and that all these parasites lived there, so probably the pollutant must have entered in fluid form into the sewer system. This would make that point a mutation site, greatly increasing the number of mutant organisms. Ming-hee, still pensive, says that mutant cockroaches are relatively easy to deal with, but those demonic rats are much more intimidating. As for the mutant larvae, he did not witness them, but he still thinks that even if they mutate, they should not be on the level of cockroaches, as they belong to the easy-to-kill group. Ming-hee continues walking calmly, until he stops feeling something. He then looks back, frightened, and notices a huge number of larvae coming out of the sewer. The grouped larvae formed a giant mutant arm. Ming-hee becomes worried upon seeing that, wondering if that is the mutant larvae. The arm of the larvae keeps getting bigger, until a giant wave of larvae emerges behind the giant arm. The giant wave of larvae comes out sweeping everything in its path. Lin, desperate, shouts for everyone to run as fast as they can from there. Lin and Ming-hee start running, being chased by the wave of larvae that sweeps everything up to the cars on the street. Ming-hee, as he runs, notices a larvae in front of him. He steps on it, crushing it, and realizes that a larva is really easy to kill, but he had forgotten that larvae are underground parasites that live in groups, and they would always walk in a colossal number. Ming-hee starts screaming for everyone to run, that those were mutant larvae and they feed in a collective group. Zheng, still not seeing the situation, asks what is the reason to be afraid. After all, that was the only reason they had gone there. However, Zheng looks deeper and is shocked by what he was seeing. Zheng starts running frantically away from the wave of larvae, while Ming-hee runs alongside. Zheng then runs to a building, saying that there is a door with reinforced glass there, so they will probably be safe there. Ming-He asks where Lin was that he didn't see her. Xiaodan, concerned, replies that apparently Lin stumbled and fell back there. Ming-He then immediately breaks, asking why they didn't help her, and he runs back, saying they need to save her. All three members of the group are paralyzed, terrified by those giant larvae. Lin is almost caught by the larvae as she screams for Ming-He not to come towards her, or he will die. Ming-He speeds towards her, and as he approaches, he says that it was she who said that classmates should help each other to grow together. At that moment, Ming-He sees the fire hydrant and gets an idea. He punches the hydrant, absorbing the water into his fist, which is now very close to that giant wave of larvae. He then delivers a water punch, creating a giant vortex towards the larvae. The water swept everything around it. The name of that punch was Explosive Wave Punch, and the water was everywhere, carrying the larvae along. Ming-He, after delivering that powerful punch, says that he may not be able to kill those larvae, but he will not allow them to do as they please. He says this as the remains of the larvae fall after receiving that powerful vortex. He then extends his hand, asking if Lin is okay. Lin, crying, can only imagine how strong Ming-He is. They begin to walk away from there, and she can only wonder if that person really is the Ming-He who studied with her. Ming-He then leads her to a safe place, telling her to relax. They will be there soon. Lin looks at Ming-He's face and says he is really very handsome. She then, sadly and embarrassed, says it's a shame since he already likes Luo Qian. However, even so, she still thanks him in her thoughts for not leaving an idiot like her behind. The two then approach the building, and upon entering, see the three members of the group sitting. Seeing her like that, they ask if she is okay. Zheng then, embarrassed, says they were already going to save her, but Ming-He was ahead so he got there first. Xing Hong says that's right, while Xiaodan says they didn't even realize she had stumbled and fallen. Zheng smiles worriedly, saying he missed the chance to save a damsel in distress. Xiaodan, seeing Lin's injuries, asks if the mutant larvae have returned to the sewer. Ming-He asks them to first worry about Lin's injuries. He says that the secretion of mutant larvae can be corrosive, so they will probably need a medicinal ointment to treat it. Smiling, Lin says it's just a small bruise, so she believes it wouldn't be enough to affect her movements. Ming-He then stands up and says it's good to know that. He asks everyone to take care of Lin while he inspects the building to prevent the larvae from entering. Ming-He then moves away from them to check the situation of the building. Xiaodan at that moment scolds the two boys, asking why they didn't think of inspecting the building. It seems that none of them is as cautious as Ming-He. And look, Ming-He was rejected from the Superhuman Institute. Zheng and Xing Hong smile awkwardly for having received that scolding. Ming-He then observes the layout of the place and decides to enter the laboratory. First, he passes through Greenhouse 1. Then, he walks through Greenhouse 4. And lastly, he passes through Greenhouse 9. In Greenhouse 9, he observes what was written on the sign, which informs that the insects from Greenhouse 9 were reported missing on December 30th, 2030, and that scene was protected, and the case is awaiting investigation. Ming-He, observing that break in the glass of the greenhouse, says he was startled for a few seconds, but apparently they have been missing for almost half a year. Ming-He wonders if the source of pollution would also cause mutation in those domestic insects. He then starts walking again, saying that everything indicates that the mutant organisms are mainly coming from the sewers. At this moment, he steps on a newspaper. He doesn't notice, but in the newspaper is a news article that standardized centipedes from Lianpu are huge centipedes that originated in southern Peru. This species is the largest species that exists and has large jaws and extremely long antennae. He then starts walking towards a double door. He tries to open it, but realizes that the back door is locked and starts to imagine that there is no other way out of there, and the sewage system is also sealed, so the mutant larvae should not be able to enter there. At this moment, Ming-He is startled to look through the glass of the door. He notices a person walking outside. Upon closer inspection, he realizes it is Dr. Zhao and wonders why the doctor is walking alone in that isolated area. Ming-He begins to imagine that he must be going to the broken building ahead, since he was heading in that direction. Ming-He finds it strange since Dr. Zhao is not a superhuman, so it is too dangerous for him to be walking alone in the streets. At this moment, his cell phone starts ringing, so he answers and realizes it's an unknown number. A woman calls He, little brother, and in a very sensual way asks where he is. It was Nurse Song calling Ming-He to accompany her to dinner. She would like to properly thank him for saving her, and doesn't accept a no for an answer. She even asks him to call her big sister. Ming-hee asks, "Big sister?" Nurse explains that her last name is Song, and her first name is Lon, but he could call her either Sister Song or even Sister Lon, and that would be fine. Ming-hee replies to Sister Song that he understood, but at that moment he couldn't do anything, as he was in an isolated area. Nurse Song then raises her voice, asking what he was doing in a dangerous place. After all, that area is completely closed off to people. She also heard that there were many mutant monsters in that area, and not just the ones they encountered when they fled the hospital. Ming-hee then replies that there is a reward, so he would like to earn some to lighten his sister's burden. Nurse Song starts taking off her high heels and asks Ming-hee if the sister he was referring to was Chin-yu. She also asks if they are blood relatives. Ming-hee replies that they are not, but they grew up together in the orphanage. Song then finishes taking off her sandals and asks Ming-hee if because of this, their bonds are even stronger than blood relatives. Ming-hee on the phone says yes. Song then starts undressing while still talking to Ming-hee on the phone and tells him she thinks he's very cute for wanting to help his sister. Song also says it's a shame he's working so that dinner can be postponed for another time. Song, now completely naked, says it's a shame since she was even dressed up. Ming-hee then, still on the phone, tells Sister Song that he just saw Dr. Zhao on the street, and he was walking alone in an isolated area, which was extremely dangerous. Song says it's strange for Dr. Zhao to be in that area, and asks if Ming-hee is sure it's him. Ming-hee replies yes, and that Dr. Zhao probably didn't see him through the door window because it's opaque from the outside. Song, now in her pajamas, says that Dr. Zhao has been acting strange in the past year. He used to be a hard worker, but lately he always leaves early. Many times, Dr. Zhao even makes mistakes during surgeries. Song also says that the doctor seems lethargic, as if he doesn't even sleep properly. Song even recounts that one day the hospital headquarters sent a sample of blood from a calamity beast. They wanted Dr. Zhao to purify it, but the doctor managed to accidentally lose it. Ming-hee, upon hearing that, is scared, remembering a class he had where the professor explained that the blood of special calamity beasts leaves their bodies and comes into contact with oxygen, causing air mutation. Calamity beast blood has an incubation period of 1 year. Ming-hee is surprised since that sample of calamity beasts probably caused the pollution in the sewers. Ming-hee then takes the opportunity to ask Sister Song when Dr. Zhao lost that calamity beast blood. Song replies that it was about a year ago. She remembers that it was precisely on the day Ming-hee arrived at the hospital. Song recalls opening the door and calling for Dr. Zhao, saying that the astronomy department had sent a tube of calamity beast blood and they were waiting for him to examine it. Ming-hee then tells Sister Song that the calamity beast blood is probably the cause of all that mutation. He explains that the timing fits perfectly since the incubation period is 1 year. So that's why even though it happened a year ago, the disasters are only happening now. Worried, Song asks if he is serious. After all, Dr. Zhao said he lost the blood after purifying it. He replies that the doctor probably lied. He also says that he had perfect grades in the super theory class, so the reason has to be that since everything fits. Song then begins to pour wine into her glass while telling Ming-hee that she is not surprised to see Dr. Zhao there in the isolated area by himself. The doctor probably realized the mistake he made and that he was to blame, so he probably went back and is trying to find that blood. Ming-hee agrees but says that it is very dangerous. After all, Dr. Zhao is not a superhuman, and there are probably many mutant monsters in that area, especially near the source of the pollution. Song starts drinking her wine and says that Dr. Zhao is probably afraid of being held responsible for this. Ming-hee says that this is not a trivial matter. He asks his big sister Song to inform the officials about what happened and to ask them to investigate that broken building immediately. He further explains that Dr. Zhao is not a superhuman, and apparently he doesn't understand that near the source of the pollution is probably the most dangerous place to be near. Ming-hee says he needs to stop him at all costs. Song then says she will contact the officials immediately and asks him to be careful. Ming-hee asks her not to worry since he will only stop Dr. Zhao from doing something stupid. He also says he doesn't intend to go to the source of the pollution. He then walks back to the group. Jing then spots him, saying he finally came back. He then approaches the group saying that the building is safe and all the doors have been sealed, so the mutant larvae probably won't be able to get in there. He then walks to the door and asks everyone to rest there, that he would go out for a minute to handle something and be right back. Lin then, worried, gets up and asks where he is going. After all, it's very dangerous to walk alone outside. He just closes the door without answering. He then sees a destroyed car beyond the larvae on the ground. He begins to think that although he didn't kill all of them, they still won't be able to do anything for a while. Ming-He then looks to one side and says that's probably the direction he should go. He then finds an alley and says he will take that shortcut to get there faster. Just as he enters the alley, 2 mutant cockroaches fly over him. The cockroaches then block his path, preventing Ming-He from escaping. From afar, it was possible to hear his 2 punches causing boom crash. He had his fist clenched since he had just finished off the 2 cockroaches with just 1 punch each. He then looks in another direction and says that's probably the way he should go. He then runs out of that alley, leaving the dead bodies of the mutant cockroaches behind. Ming-He then runs stealthily to the end of a street and finally finds Zhao. The doctor then enters an abandoned building. Ming-He takes advantage and follows him inside the building. Upon entering the building, Ming-He sees a huge hole and asks why there is that huge hole inside the building. In the hole, there was also a rope ladder nailed. Ming-He imagines that probably the doctor went down that ladder. Ming-He then just jumps into the hole, wondering what Dr. Zhao is thinking of doing in a place like that. Upon landing on the ground, Ming-He thinks that the situation is not as simple as it seems. He comes across a path full of pipes. He then follows the path until he reaches the end, where he spots Dr. Zhao again at the end of the tunnel. Dr. Zhao then exits the tunnel while Ming-He follows him and comes across the water supply for the city of Lanyang. Dr. Zhao is climbing the stairs of that supply and Ming-He shouts his name, asking what he was doing there. Dr. Zhao is startled, asking if it was really Ming-He who was there. Dr. Zhao is startled, asking if it was really Ming-He who was there. Ming-He, without wasting any time, asks Dr. Zhao if he really purified the blood of the Calamity Beast last year. The doctor asks how he knows about it. Ming-He shouts, demanding him to just answer the question. Zhao, trembling with concern over the situation, admits he made a serious mistake and initially didn't realize it. As Zhao starts to descend the stairs, he remarks that he had no intention of hiding the truth, and that it was indeed unintentional. Approaching Ming-He, Zhao explains that being a doctor is not easy, that he is constantly saving lives and actually enjoys it. He further confesses that he was unaware his negligence would cause this mutation, and therefore he is there to check if the city's supply is polluted, since the contaminated blood was lost nearby. Dr. Zhao becomes increasingly desperate, shouting that all he wants is to do the right thing, truly from the bottom of his heart. Ming-He finds the doctor's behavior strange and responds that, like it or not, the doctor is not a superhuman, so he should have reported the situation to the authorities, who would have taken appropriate measures. At a loss for what to do, Zhao says at least Ming-He is a superhuman. Zhao grabs Ming-He's hands, crying that he saw him save a lot of people when the hospital was attacked by mutant cockroaches, and Ming-He also defeated the demonic rat, with Dr. Zhao as a witness. Zhao begs for his help. Becoming increasingly desperate and starting to cry, he says he has a wife and children to take care of, and if the authorities find out, he will not only lose his job, but will also go straight to jail. He explains that if that happens, no one will take care of his family, so he pleads for Ming-He's help to end this disaster together. Zhao kneels down, begging Ming-He to help him. Ming-He is surprised by everything he is hearing. He approaches the doctor and asks him to calm down, then explains that unfortunately, his ability has limits. Moreover, Zhao is just a doctor, so what he was doing there was just courting death. Ming-He takes the doctor's hands and explains that what he was doing would only worsen the situation. The doctor starts wiping his tears, admitting that Ming-He is right. Their abilities are indeed limited, so what they can do is also limited. Ming-He then says their priority is to get out of there, and then go to the authorities to report the situation, rather than letting them handle it. The doctor remains silent for a moment, and then asks, "Report this to the authorities." Zhao is pleased, saying that this means that so far Ming-He hasn't told anyone about it, since he is suggesting reporting it to the authorities. Ming-He confirms that he hasn't told anyone. He adds that it's better for the doctor himself to explain to the authorities in his own version. Ming-He begins to look around and asks Dr. Zhao if this is where he lost the blood of the beast, because if that's the case, then that is exactly where the pollution is. Zhao, looking down, admits that yes, that is indeed the place, but he did not lose the blood of the beast. As the doctor gradually stands up after saying this, he draws Ming-He's attention, and once fully upright, tells Ming-He that he is still a student, so there are many things he still cannot understand. Ming-He stares at the doctor for a moment, and then begins to suspect that there really is something suspicious about Dr. Zhao. Realizing that he cannot just leave since Dr. Zhao has a suspicious look that might cause something strange there, Ming-He tells the doctor that he does not understand what he meant by that. Zhao remains silent for a moment, and then says that Ming-He has already seen the cockroach, the larva, and even the rat. Zhao explains that all of them live in the shadows of the city producing germs and transmitting diseases, The existence of them leads people to exterminate them, right? He asks Minghe. Minghe, confused, agrees that it's true, but in his thoughts he's trying to understand what Dr. Zhao is implying. Zhao, with a sinister look, asks if Minghe has ever thought about how humans reproduce recklessly, steal recklessly, and keep creating industrial and chemical pollution non-stop. He further explains that people have constantly destroyed the environment to the extent that there is so much trash, they even send it to space. Zhao shouts that what humanity has done is no different from what the cockroaches, larvae, and rats do. Minghe tells the doctor that his thinking is indeed correct. Humanity really does need to protect the environment. Zhao agrees, but then reveals what Minghe does not know. To the universe, the creation of life is actually a mistake. Zhao, with his sinister smile, explains that life should never have existed, and that a universe without life is wonderful and serene. However, once life existed, it became akin to an invasive bacteria in a healthy body. Zhao further explains about cancer cells, and how their most notable characteristic is their ability to divide infinitely and uncontrollably, thus destroying any living cell. Humans reproduce every generation, and they never stop devastating the world. Zhao goes mad with his explanation, saying that humanity even aims to leave Earth to conquer the solar system, and then the Milky Way. Therefore, wherever humans exist, there will never be beauty and peace. Minghe, concerned by all this, asks if the doctor isn't exaggerating. After all, everything he said is anti-human. Moreover, Minghe really is just a student, so he cannot grasp the complexity of the idea the doctor just expressed. The doctor rushes to Minghe, asking if, when he gets sick, his body's immune system will eliminate those germs for him, right? Minghe says yes. The doctor asks if it's the same logic for the universe. The universe is sick, and humans are the virus. Soon the universe will create something to kill everyone. Zhao, still holding on to Minghe, starts shouting that Minghe is a young superhuman, so everything he learned about calamity beasts, disasters, catastrophes, are actually the works of the universe's immune system. That is, everything is going according to the universe's will to eliminate the threat. Zhao, completely insane with a dark laugh, says that the universe is doing its utmost to completely exterminate humanity. Minghe starts to get stressed, saying that the doctor's talk is going way beyond the real topic they are currently on. Minghe already starts to look at the doctor differently, imagining that he is acting very strange, basically going crazy. Minghe tells the doctor that their focus at the moment should be on the source of the pollution that generated those mutants, and that all this was his fault, including how many people died because of it. Zhao adjusts his glasses and asks if that really is a mistake. Zhao removes his glasses and, completely insane, says that he is a doctor, and when people are sick, he takes care of them. And the same applies to the universe. He is the doctor of the universe. Zhao says he is responsible for eradicating humans from the universe who have proliferated like cancer cells. Zhao breaks his glasses, and with a completely insane face, looking more like a mutant, says that not even the cockroaches, rats, and larvae living in the sewers are as terrible as humanity. Minghe starts to become concerned about the drastic mood change the doctor is having. Zhao explains that he created the source of the mutation on purpose, that initially it was a simple experiment. He would start by killing just the people of the city Lanyang, then would go on killing people from other metropolitan areas. Zhao throws his broken glasses on the ground and says that the Earth is sick, so it needs treatment. Thus humans need to be annihilated. Zhao gives a slight smile, already drooling, and points his finger at Minghe, saying that before completing the great treatment, he will have to eliminate a rebellious bug like Minghe. Zhao approaches with a sinister smile and thanks Minghe for being so dumb and innocent, and after dealing with him, Zhao will be able to continue his plan to completely pollute the city. Zhao imagines all the isolated places, and then tells the doctor that the entire southern suburb has been completely isolated and quarantined, so even if he had planned this since last year, it would not be possible for the mutation to spread. Zhao, still insane, gives a long laugh and says that indeed the government can block the surface and even the soil, but how will they block the water pipes? Minghe becomes extremely worried as Dr. Zhao says that all the city's water passes through there. Zhao explains that through the plumbing system, the source of the mutation will spread throughout the city of Lanyang. He further says that the city needs water to wash groceries, bathe, and clean anything they want. All this water comes from that supply, so all this water will end up in the city's sewers. He also says that in the end, all the city's cockroaches, rats, and larvae will undergo mutation. Minghe interrupts the doctor, saying he doesn't understand any of what he's saying. Minghe says this, but is thinking he needs to get out of there urgently, and since Dr. Zhao is not a superhuman, he shouldn't be able to stop it. Minghe says Zhao can continue what he was doing, but Minghe needs to leave there now. Zhao, not understanding anything, asks if Minghe won't try to stop him right then. Minghe begins to leave, and Zhao starts saying that when Minghe saved all those people from the hospital, wasn't that an act of justice? After all, doesn't he want to be the hero who saves the city? Minghe continues on his way saying he doesn't care about that. He only cares about his own life. Minghe waves his hand and just says that he is trash that wasn't accepted into the Institute for Superhumans, so he is completely disqualified to be a hero. Zhao can't believe Minghe is saying this. Zhao puts his hand inside his shirt and says that Minghe is even smart for not getting in the way. The doctor also says that now he just needs to put the blood in the tank, and the plan will be successfully completed. Zhao, with a diabolical face, imagines that after that, even if the authorities arrive, it will be too late to do anything about it. At this moment, Zhao realizes that the vial of the beast's blood has disappeared from his pocket and becomes furious upon seeing this. He then remembers that at one moment, Minghe touched his body when he said he didn't understand anything, and at that time probably stole the blood. Zhao becomes completely stressed as his body begins to undergo a mutation. He then kneels as his head starts to hurt in a surreal way. His teeth begin to grow, and in his head, he can only imagine himself turning into a monster. His legs also begin to mutate until he finally turns into a mutant, completely consumed by fury. The doctor, now a mutant, is roaring extremely loudly and furiously. Minghe is running at that moment while Zhao shouts from afar to return that blood. Minghe imagines that apparently that vial really is the key to everything. He looks back and sees Dr. Zhao following him. Minghe wonders if this is Dr. Zhao's superhuman ability. Zhao is completely different now that he is a mutant. Zhao with one arm tightens the muscle of the other arm, which was slower than usual, and then pulls a monster out of it, throwing this monster towards Minghe. At that moment, Minghe can only think that just like the cockroaches, rats, and larvae, the doctor also underwent mutation. The monsters jump onto Minghe's back at high speed because they were thrown by that mutant. Minghe was already climbing the stairs, imagining that he had finally managed to get there. However, the mutant monsters cut the rope before he can escape from there. The demonic monster steps back a bit and prepares to attack again. Minghe is now surrounded, imagining that those damned monsters are sneaky. Minghe looks at the monsters and the ropes, realizing that Zhao wasn't aiming at him or the monsters, but at the stairs to cut them and prevent his escape. The demonic monsters attack all at once. Minghe sees an opening and then starts kicking all the monsters, using them as a springboard to escape from the hole. He successfully escapes the hole using the monsters as support, and upon emerging, he notices concrete beside him. He quickly places his hand on the concrete, while extracting that element to use his power. He then uses this new power to seal the exit of the hole completely, with his power using the concrete he found there. The mutant monsters trying to follow Minghe hit their heads on the concrete as they try to pursue him. The monsters were at high speed, so they hit their heads and fall back to the ground where the mutant Zhao was. Zhao looks up and says he can smell the blood of the beast. He, still with a sinister look and sticking out his tongue, says he knows this because his body is full of that blood. He also says that Minghe won't escape him by any means. Minghe continues running through the city streets, fleeing with the blood in his possession. He starts to think about the mutations, and that apparently they are based on how strong they were when they were still animals. With the worms being even weaker, their rank is nearly serve. Then come the mutant cockroaches with the servant rank. After them is the demonic rat with the general rank. Minghe still imagines that the demonic rat gave him quite a bit of trouble to defeat. He also imagines that if the mutant forms from an adult human, it would be a problem, as is the case with Dr. Zhao. Minghe follows the path to exit the alley while imagining that Dr. Zhao in mutant form must be extremely powerful, so probably Minghe is not capable of dealing with him. Thinking about this, Minghe immediately stops running, realizing that he can't go in the direction of the people in the building ahead. He then changes his direction, imagining that with the current strength of the mutant Zhou, if Minghe is followed by him, it will be a big problem since everyone in that building will probably die. Minghe imagines he needs to stall as much as possible until the officials arrive there behind that blood. He proceeds down the street, hoping that Nurse Song really did go to notify the officials. Elsewhere, larvae are scattered on the ground. A person steps in the middle of them. It was Huang Feng who is cleaning the city. He is of lunar rank. Nearby, in the abandoned buildings to the west, Xiaolan, who is also of lunar rank, says that the cleaning there is complete. Xiao Zhang, also of lunar rank, tells everyone to return since his magical power has also run out. Luo Kaishuan says he will call his puppets back. He smiles, saying that they are about to receive a huge reward for that cleaning. The man in a blue shirt says that, apparently, that group didn't even need a healer like him for that mission. He looks at the whole team happily and wonders why there are no strong monsters there. He doesn't notice a red light coming out of the sewer cover where he was standing. At this moment, everyone on the team is startled as they look up. The healer in the blue shirt is thrown very high, even higher than the buildings, by something from beneath the sewer cover. Xiaolan quickly jumps to help, catches the healer in the air, and returns to the street holding him safely. Everyone looks at the hole formed in the ground where the sewer cover was. Mutant Zhao emerges from that hole with red eyes, thirsting for blood. Feng laughs at the situation and says that the rookie healer really has no luck. Xiao Jiang also laughs at the situation and says he didn't expect that there would be a different mutant in the sewers, right under the cover where the healer was. He suggests they clean it up quickly to look for a good place to rest. Kaixuan gets excited seeing that the monster is huge and already imagines they will make a lot of money defeating it. Kaixuan imagines that a mutant monster of that size will earn them at least $100,000, and since there are 5 of them there, each would earn $20,000. It's definitely much more lucrative than fighting those worms. Mutant Zhao starts walking towards them, while Feng tells the mutant that he is quite disgusting and unlucky to encounter a group with several lunar ranks. Mutant Zhao gets excited and says he will enjoy dealing with them. Mutant Zhao charges forward with his huge hand attempting to grab Feng while saying he will eliminate him right there. Feng charges energy in his foot and then jumps back saying that the monster is extremely slow. So how does he think he will catch him? Feng is then startled to see the mutant's hand increasing in size coming towards his head. The arm grew so much in size that it finally reached Feng, who was trying to escape. Feng is pressed against the wall while spitting blood. Zhao says he figured it would be quite easy. Zhao starts to lift him with one arm. With the other arm, he begins to transform it into a weapon. Zhao does this while saying that the best way to cure them is by killing them all. At this moment, several spikes emerge from mutant Zhao's body, piercing through Feng's entire body. Zhao boasts, saying that one is down. Xiaolan puts the healer on the ground while shouting Feng's name. She jumps again at full speed and slashes Mutant Zhao in several places, screaming for him to let Feng go. Mutant Zhao is having fun with the situation. The cuts made on his body by Xiaolan's sword heal quickly, eventually sealing completely. Xiaolan, enraged, screams that he is a disgusting mutant, and charges at him at full speed. Mutant Zhao quickly looks at her and then attacks her with his other arm without her being able to react. Xiaolan has her chest cut without any difficulty. Mutant Zhao throws Feng's body away. Now both are lifeless on the ground, while Zhao says that 2 are down and asks the rest of the team if they are happy to see their teammates dead. Xiao Jiang and Kaixuan are completely terrified before that monster. Mutant Zhao, with a demonic face, says that they will certainly be happy after all. They will get the profit from the 2 who were killed. At this moment, some monsters come out through the sewer hole. These are the creatures that Mutant Zhao summoned right when he transformed. The demonic monsters start sniffing around looking for Minghe. Mutant Zhao says he wanted to have fun with the 2 who are left, but unfortunately he is short on time. The 2 are paralyzed with fear, including Kaixuan, who could no longer even stand up from shaking so much. The mutant monsters, after so much sniffing, report that they found something. They then run at full speed to the location. Mutant Zhao is happy to have finally found it, and starts running following the demonic monsters, while saying he will love to make Minghe into pieces. Kaixuan, crying, asks what the hell that monster is. Xiao Jiang, also crying and holding the dead Xiaolan, says that definitely that monster is of the leader class. There's no way it could be a class below that. They say they are definitely lucky to have survived. The demonic monsters begin running all over the city, jumping from building to building. Minghe, running at full speed, says he had definitely managed to lose them. However, even so, those demonic monsters managed to locate him even in these complex streets. Minghe, looking at those monsters, imagines they must have been able to locate him by the smell of that blood. Minghe continues running, thankful that the speed of Mutant Zhao is not as great as that of those demonic monsters. Minghe, looking at the vial with the blood, imagines that under no circumstances can it fall into the hands of Mutant Zhao again. At that moment, Minghe notices something ahead. He was near a gas station. He decides to head to the station, specifically to the gas pumps. He starts pouring gasoline on his hand, thinking that he doesn't know if he'll be able to hold out until the authorities arrive. But the strong smell of gasoline should mask his own scent a bit. Minghe then decides to enter the gas station store to hide. He looks out through the glass and sees that the demonic monsters don't know his exact location. Minghe is relieved because the gasoline really worked. He says this while continuing to rub gasoline on his arm. The demonic monsters keep searching everywhere, but one of them senses a strange smell coming from inside the store. The demonic monster decides to head towards the store. Ming-He can't believe it. The monster then passes through the door. It enters slowly, trying to pinpoint the smell, while Ming-He stays hidden behind some shelves. Ming-He starts to worry because suddenly the monster's footsteps stop making noise, suggesting it has stopped moving. At that moment, the demonic monster is already above the shelf looking right at Ming-He. Ming-He only realizes when a drop of blood from the monster falls on his cheek. Ming-He looks at the glass of a machine and notices that the monster is on top of it and is indeed attacking him. Ming-He at the last second manages to dodge, ducking just in time. Ming-He grabs a metal rod that supports the shelf he was under and then pushes it, knocking the whole shelf onto the demonic monster. After doing this, he runs towards the door. As he approaches the door, he stops abruptly. He grabs the doorknob and figures that undoubtedly the other 3 monsters went in another direction, and only the monster that was on the shelf has a higher sensitivity to smell, and is there alone because of it. In other words, that monster was left behind. Ming-He, thinking this, decides to close the door, and thinks that fleeing is useless. He figures that if he doesn't kill that monster with a higher sensitivity to smells, Ming-He will be found sooner or later by it. Ming-He starts to gather energy, figuring he needs to kill that monster there and now. The demonic monster finally destroys the shelf that was on its back. Ming-He stands before the monster, and then thinks that his hand needs to be in contact with something special to activate the corresponding fist ability to what he is touching. He remembers the battle in the hospital against the mutant cockroach, where for a brief moment he had sulfuric acid fists when his hand came into contact with sulfuric acid, just like his fight against the demonic rat, where he obtained flaming fists when his hand touched the fire, or his fight against the mutant larvae, where he had explosive wave fists when his hand touched water. Ming-He then starts to look around the market and sees nothing there that could really be effective to use with his fist. However, he cannot leave there to find something, as by leaving he risks the other demonic monsters finding him, and thus mutant Zhao would too. The demonic monster, without wasting time, jumps on Ming-He trying to devour him, while Ming-He figures he has no choice but to fight inside that supermarket. He then dodges the claws of the monster while gathering energy throughout his body. With this, he delivers a powerful kick to the monster's belly, throwing it far towards a wall where there were some bags of wheat. The demonic monster hits them hard, causing a strong explosion and raising a lot of dust there. Ming-He's vision is compromised by the dust that was raised. The monster emerges from nowhere in the middle of all that dust, attacking Ming-He quickly. Ming-He doesn't have time to react and is pinned to the ground by the monster's claws. Ming-He tries to free himself at all costs, but the monster is pressing his body down hard against the ground. The demonic monster prepares to devour Ming-He's head, but he manages to dodge at the last second. The monster lifts its paw slightly, allowing Ming-He to move his arm better, and because of this, he delivers a powerful punch to the monster's chin. Ming-He takes advantage of the moment to get up, and while the monster is still airborne from the blow, he prepares to attack. He unleashes numerous punches on the monster's belly, giving it no time to react. Ming-He then gathers even more energy for his final punch, and strikes with great force, causing damage to the wall of the market. He remains with his arm paused where he delivered his last punch. The monster's head is completely shattered along with the wall, while Ming-He's hand is only slightly bloodied. Ming-He then turns to leave, and on the floor lies the dead monster, headless from the powerful blow. At the same time elsewhere, mutant Zhao notices something happening. A wound suddenly appears on his shoulder. He touches the wound and becomes enraged, suspecting it's Ming-He's doing. He then walks toward the supermarket along with other mutant monsters. He arrives and kicks down the door. Upon entering, he sees one of his monsters dead without a head. Mutant Zhao becomes even more furious and declares that he will have to make his monsters undergo more mutations to be able to fight the accursed Ming-He. Zhao points to the body of his dead monster and orders his other monsters to completely devour it. All the monsters rush towards the dead demonic monster and begin to devour it entirely. The monsters begin to undergo a new mutation after consuming the carcass. Mutant Zhao is pleased to see his new creation, imagining that now his new monsters have an even greater sensitivity to smell. Zhao orders all the monsters to search for Ming-He, but they must bring him back alive. The monsters speed off after receiving this order. Ming-He continues running through the city, trying to get even further away from the monsters. He notices that he is still being followed, and now they are even closer, which is strange, since he had eliminated the monster with the highest smell sensitivity. He sees the monsters jumping from car to car heading towards him, but Ming-He does not understand why this is happening, since their smell sensitivity wasn't that good before. Ming-He, seeing them quite close, begins to find it strange, as the growling of the demonic monsters is also different, and their appearance is a bit more frightening. At that moment, Mingyi is surprised to look ahead and see that he has arrived at an amusement park, which seems like a good place to hide, and also to deal with those monsters, given the size of the area if those monsters follow him inside. He also observes the vastness of the park, and imagines that as long as he has contact with something that can be used for his mysterious fist technique, he will be able to drastically increase his own strength. Mingyi goes to a fountain and begins to wash his arm there to remove the gasoline. Mingyi figures that, since he is being hunted anyway, he might as well remove what is causing him discomfort. Additionally, even if he were to encounter fire somewhere, he would likely be completely engulfed in flames before he could absorb the fire into his hands, so it would not be worthwhile to keep the gasoline on his body. After washing his arms, Mingyi figures that, regardless, the demonic monsters will end up finding him, whether he walks in circles or hides. With that in mind, it seems the best strategy is to keep running. Mingyi starts walking through the park, planning first to increase the distance between himself and the monsters at intervals. Mingyi walks while thinking that all he needs to do is eliminate the monsters, since by doing so, there will be nothing that Mutant Zhao can do to stop him. At that moment, a claw emerges behind him. He hears the noise and decides to look back to see what it is. The demonic monster is already very close to him, but now it's completely different and undoubtedly more frightening than before. Mingyi asks what the heck that is, and how did these demonic monsters get so big? The mutant monster jumps from where it was and attacks Mingyi. Now the monster's arm is shaped like an axe. The monster swings this axe with all its force towards Mingyi. Mingyi dodges, and where the attack landed, a huge gash is left due to the power of the monster. Mingyi, after dodging, observes the monster closely and says that definitely the demonic monsters have evolved and are significantly stronger than before. The monster, still furious, charges at Mingyi at full speed. It delivers a powerful blow towards Mingyi's throat, but he dodges at the last second. The demonic monster, extremely furious, starts unleashing several simultaneous attacks, but Mingyi continues to dodge them all with great ease. The monster then attempts one last, even more powerful strike, but Mingyi leaps backwards, distancing himself from the monster. Mingyi lands on the ground and begins to realize that, although the monster has gained enormous strength, it has also lost a bit of speed. With this realization, Mingyi manages to dodge all the blows, although some by a very narrow margin. Mingyi prepares for the fight and even taunts the monster, telling it not to rush foolishly. The demonic monster grows increasingly furious. At this moment, two other demonic monsters arrive, surrounding Mingyi. He starts to worry about his situation. He glances at the newly arrived monsters and then starts running away, bidding goodbye to all the monsters. Mingyi dashes off at full speed, jumping over the fence inside the park. The monsters continue to watch him. Mingyi decides to climb one of the playground structures, stating he will use the narrow rails to confront them from above. One of the monsters starts climbing the rail, while Mingyi plans to keep the confrontation one-on-one until he reaches the highest point of the rail, where he will finish off all the monsters at once. Mingyi uses his mysterious fist power, element extraction, and with this, he begins to infuse power into his hand. Mingyi reaches the top of the rail and still has power in his fists. He just waits for the monsters to reach him. The demonic monster finally arrives, jumping and screaming, eager to devour Mingyi at any cost. Mingyi just waits for the monster to get closer while gathering energy. With a lot of power charged in his fist, he delivers a powerful punch while asking the monster if it really thought Mingyi wouldn't be rude to it. The punch causes a huge explosion visible even from afar, since Mingyi and the monsters are at the top of the roller coaster. Mingyi lands a direct hit on the monster's paw, completely destroying it, and before the monster has a chance to react, he prepares another punch with his other fist while taunting the monster, calling it a pet. With this, Mingyi lands a punch straight through the chest of the demonic monster, creating a hole in it. The monster couldn't withstand that powerful, mysterious fist. Blood spurts everywhere as the demonic monster falls from the top of the roller coaster, lifeless. Mingyi observes the damage he caused and remarks that his mysterious fist, using gold as a medium, is truly powerful, as it managed to pierce through the demonic monster with just one punch. Before Mingyi could rest, another monster approaches, thirsty for blood. Mingyi observes and wonders if these evolved monsters are at least at the commander level. Mingyi snaps his fingers and invites these pets to come at him as he is ready. The demonic monster continues climbing the roller coaster, while the other demonic monster circles around to attack from below the rails. At this moment, One monster comes from above the rail and the other from below. Ming, he can't believe what he's seeing and questions if the monsters really think this will make a difference. The monster coming from below the rail approaches closer. Ming-He just wants to see what that little monster will be capable of. The demonic monster coming from above jumps, trying to devour Ming-He with just one bite. Ming-He prepares his fists while the monster tries to bite him. The monster then changes strategy and attacks with its fists, which at that moment look more like sharp blades. Ming-He manages to block, as his arms are now harder than iron. With the arm Ming-He blocked with, he pushes away the claws of the demonic monster, and with this, he prepares a punch with his other fist. Then, without wasting any time, he delivers a powerful blow. The demonic monster becomes desperate seeing the punch coming its way. The punch hits squarely, but Ming-He notices that a bony armor emerges on the monster's chest, blocking the punch. The demonic monster is thrown far away, but it managed to deflect the blocked blow. Meanwhile, the other demonic monster coming from underneath the rails is getting closer. Ming-He starts to worry as the monsters are evolving extremely fast even during the battle. The demonic monster then gets closer and tries to bite Ming-He's leg, but he dodges at the last second. Ming-He takes advantage of his position and stomps hard on the monster's neck, but armor appears covering the neck and blocking the attack. The demonic monster smiles, and at that moment, spikes emerge from its bony armor, attempting to stab Ming-He's foot, who dodges at the last moment. Ming-He immediately moves away, while imagining that, in addition to the armor, the monsters can also form bone spikes around their necks. Ming-He can only think of the surreal adaptation these monsters have. Ming-He prepares again for the fight, thinking that, although he had a great strategy, he is now completely surrounded. The two demonic monsters decide to attack at the same time. Ming-He remains worried at this moment. He dodges the blow from one monster while blocking the strike from the other, all at the same time. Without wasting time, Ming-He delivers several blows to one of the monsters, but the bony armor blocks all of them. Ming-He continues to defend against all the blows coming his way, but one of them gets through, causing a small cut on his chest. Ming-He, while blocking, hits both monsters, causing them to back off a bit. The fight continues frenetically on top of the mountain. The monsters give Ming-He no time to rest and try to bite him. Ming-He keeps defending and attacking simultaneously. Ming-He even manages to land a punch on each monster at the same time, but due to the awkward position, he can't inflict much damage on them. Ming-He prepares to continue the fight, while the monsters also get ready after each taking a punch. Ming-He decides to try to finish at least one, and then moves towards it ready to deliver his blow with all his strength, while the demonic monster also prepares to attack him. Ming-He, being faster, begins to deliver several simultaneous blows, and all the monster can do is cross its arms to try to defend against them all. The demonic monster is thrown far away. Despite having defended all the blows, the monster breaks its own body to not fly too far. It still smiles as if it found the fight easy. Ming-He becomes worried again while he gathers energy in his fists again. At this moment, without the demonic monster realizing, a tram comes along the track and hits it squarely, finishing off this monster instantly. Ming-He is hanging underneath the track to avoid being run over by the tram. He already knew what would happen. He begins to recall that he went to the control room, and there he checked the panel and saw that there was still electricity, so he could activate the roller coaster tram and try to finish off the two at the same time. Ming-He remains hanging on the roller coaster, and while looking down, imagines that he can't fall from that height at all, as it would break his legs or even kill him. He looks at the monster, which is also hanging, imagining that now only it remains to face. Ming-He starts to move along the rails using his hands until he gets close to the monster. The demonic monster becomes even more furious and jumps, attacking Ming-He with both arms, doing this because it is holding onto the rails with its tail. Ming-He blocks using both arms and then throws himself holding the monster, sending it down together. At this moment, Ming-He can only imagine how these monsters are mere parasites coming from Dr. Zhao, and that if that monster falls from that height, it will turn into minced meat below. Ming-He continues to fall while still holding the monster's legs and asks the monster if it thinks dying together with Ming-He would be a victory. Without wasting time, Ming-He mounts the monster while saying that the only use for that dog would be to serve as a meat shield. Ming-He keeps the monster's arms crossed so it can't do anything, while he imagines the outcome will now be different. The demonic monster begins to despair as it will crash hard into the ground. Then the two crash onto the ground, causing a huge explosion from the impact. Ming-He stands up amidst the dust and asks the monster if it was trying to make things difficult. Ming-He stands up, dusting off his clothes while saying that he found the battle too easy. He begins to walk around the park looking for somewhere to clean himself. He finds some taps and decides to wash his hands there until he hears his phone ringing. It was Nurse Song, who is desperate because Ming-hee hadn't answered any of her calls. She asks if everything is okay with him. Ming-hee says yes, that he just hadn't answered because his phone was on silent. She starts to tell him that officials arrived at the construction site Ming-hee had mentioned and took over the whole area. Song also mentions that at the site, officials found various mutant monsters, but they are already cleaning the place up. However, the officials commented that they didn't see Ming-hee or Dr. Zhao at the site. Ming-hee finishes drying his hand while explaining the situation to Nurse Song. He says he is at an amusement park at the moment and that Dr. Zhao planned all that pollution. Moreover, Dr. Zhao was planning to spill the beast's blood into the city's water reservoir. With that, he would take control of the water and sewage reserves of the entire city. Nurse Song begins to ponder about Zhao and asks why the doctor would commit such an atrocity. Ming-hee explains about the serum, saying he managed to steal it from Dr. Zhao, and that this serum is probably the cause of all this pollution. Ming-hee further explains that mutative pollutants and autogenic resistances are both present in most biological serums. Ming-hee holds the serum in his hand and says that after experts extract the purifying substance from the serum, the pollution in the southern suburbs of the city can be reversed, so this is of the utmost priority. Nurse Song, concerned about everything, asks Ming-hee over the phone if he is really at the amusement park. She says she will call the officials to escort him back. Ming-hee, looking at his cell phone map, says he won't do that, and then asks her to inform the officials to meet him at the south tower of the city. Ming-hee explains that he is still being pursued by Dr. Zhao, so he can't stay in the same place for too long. Ming-hee mentions that Dr. Zhao underwent a mutation, so the officials need to send professionals to stop the doctor. Otherwise, he will kill everyone. It is night, and Ming-hee continues running from the park while Nurse Song says she understands the situation and will request what Ming-hee asked. Ming-hee continues running at full speed as he is still being pursued by the mutant Dr. Zhao. At this moment, someone watches Ming-hee running. It was Dr. Zhao watching Ming-hee while saying he really hoped he would be around there. Ming-hee notices that person looking at him and can't believe that Dr. Zhao has reached him. Zhao, observing from afar, catches Ming-hee's attention asking if he is okay. Without wasting time, Zhao points his finger upward and asks Ming-hee to look up just for a minute. Ming-hee sees that there are several people screaming at the top of the ride, asking Ming-hee for help. Zhao explains that on his way there, he bumped into those people and that he even wanted to kill them, but decided to leave those people alive since he discovered that they are all friends of Ming-hee. Thus, they were worth more alive than dead. Ming-hee looks up and sees that it's Xiaodan, Lin, and Zheng who are at the top of the ride. The three, desperate, just ask Ming-hee to save them. Xinghong, who is also on the ride, screams in desperation that he doesn't want to die yet. Xiaodan shouts to Ming-hee that the monster's target is him, so all four of them up there are innocent. Meanwhile, Lin urges Ming-hee to escape as quickly as possible because he isn't strong enough to face that monster, as it is a general class monster. Ming-hee looks up at the top of the ride, wondering what he can do in that situation. After all, he couldn't defeat Mutant Zhao. Ming-hee, looking at everyone on the ride, thinks that he doesn't care about leaving the three jerks behind, but he can't abandon Lin no matter what. Ming-hee continues to observe Mutant Zhao while thinking that he needs to buy as much time as possible until the officials arrive. Only then everyone might get out alive. Mutant Zhao laughs and asks what the problem is. He also asks Ming-hee if among the four on the ride there is someone important to him, since he isn't running away. Mutant Zhao looks up and tries to guess who this important person might be. He asks if it might be a girlfriend. After all, he doesn't need to guess since he knows who it is. Zhao looks at Lin and says that it's probably her since she was the one who asked Ming-hee to flee. Lin, embarrassed by the monster's suggestion that she and Ming-hee are a couple, says that's not it. She was just concerned for a classmate, that's all. Zhao laughs at the situation and asks Ming-hee if it's worth risking his life for a classmate. Ming-hee replies to Zhao that he would never understand. After all, there's a huge difference between people and animals. Zhao asks if he's really going to insult him by calling him an animal. Ming-hee also laughs and says he remembers all that trash Zhao talked about in the underground, about futility. Ming-hee says he found that hilarious. Ming-hee says it's funny because, in the doctor's opinion, life and humanity are diseases and cancerous cells that are taking advantage of the universe. Ming-hee picks up a leaf blowing in the wind and says that for him, the existence of life, the appearance of humanity was responsible for not leaving the universe lonely. After all, life springs from the evolution of the universe. Zhao starts laughing crazily after hearing about life emerging from evolution. Zhao asks where humanity is even evolving. Minghe says that humanity is evolving in its ideologies and civilizations, not to mention the people themselves, since superhumans have also been born. Mutant Zhao responds that superhumans are just a disease with an improved defense system, nothing more, nothing less. Zhao fixes his gaze on Minghe, while saying that he even admits that some viruses are harder to eliminate than others. After all, this virus has abilities to become stronger, and thus evolve. Minghe feels a bit awkward after all, that all fits well with him. Zhao continues to look at Minghe, while Minghe responds that each of them has a different point of view, so they won't get anywhere with this. However, there is an easier way for them to resolve that situation. Minghe says that whoever is stronger between the two is the one who is right. Minghe thinks and says there's only one problem with that. Minghe is a human who fits among these superhumans. But now what does Mutant Zhao represent after all? Mutant Zhao begins to get furious and says he represents the cosmic power of the universe, a cosmic power that will annihilate all humanity. Minghe, observing all that discourse, says that's fine. He then places his hand on the serum and says that, if defeated, Minghe will give that serum to Zhao without any problems. Mutant Zhao laughs while saying that Minghe really is an arrogant fool. Minghe tells Zhao that if he cannot defeat a mere student who couldn't even pass the test at the Academy for Superhumans, then he should stop brainwashing himself with such a foolish belief. Minghe, stressed, says that Zhao is nothing more than a failure, an animal, simply trash. Mutant Zhao, not in the mood for much conversation, responds that if Minghe doesn't hand over the serum soon, Zhao will simply kill all 4 people at the top of the ride. Minghe, full of confidence, says he can kill all of them. He further explains that all 4 are students of the Superhuman Academy. They all swore on their lives the moment they entered the academy to protect the nation, cities, and citizens at all costs. With that said, it is very worthwhile to trade their lives for the safety of everyone in the city of Lanyang. Zhao, smiling, says that's fine then. He will kill everyone right now. He says this while growing large bones from his arm. He breaks one of the bones, which are quite sharp, and without even looking back, he throws the broken bone towards the people at the top of the ride. The bone flies at full speed and pierces through Zheng's leg. Everyone despairs upon seeing this. Zheng starts screaming and crying like mad, asking why he was attacked. Minghe just turns his back and starts to walk away. Zhao, smiling, picks another spiny bone and says this time he will aim right at his classmate's pretty face. Zhao then throws the bone with force towards Lin, hitting her squarely in the shoulder. Lin clutches her shoulder in pain, while Zhao just says that unfortunately, he missed again. Minghe clenches his fists, still irritated, but begins to run away from there. Zhao can't believe what Minghe is doing, and starts shouting that if he runs away again, he will turn all 4 on the ride into a sieve. He says this while furious and holding several bones at the same time. Minghe keeps running while people at the top of the ride scream for him to save them and that they don't want to die. Minghe just ignores everything and keeps running. Zhao starts to worry since it will be quite problematic if Minghe just keeps thinking about running away. Zhao then smiles, thinking that even though it's a waste of time, killing Minghe will definitely make him feel better. Minghe keeps running and several spikes appear in front of him. At this moment, Zhao shouts loudly that he accepts the terms. Minghe then stops in front of those spikes upon hearing Zhao say that. Minghe takes a deep breath and looks back towards Zhao. Zhao begins to mutate again, while raising his hand and going towards the ground, causing a huge explosion, sending dust everywhere. Minghe protects himself from the flying boulders due to Zhao's strike on the ground. Zhao, now fully mutated, says that he accepts the duel against Minghe. However, the battle makes no sense if Minghe is going to keep running away all the time. There are several spikes around them, and Zhao says that now this will be the arena where they will battle, and each time Minghe steps out of the arena's boundary, Zhao will kill one of the 4 at the top. And he says he is not joking. Minghe, gathering energy in his body, says he accepts the conditions. Zhao, with his hands intertwined, says that if he loses the fight, naturally Minghe will be able to save them all. At this moment, a red bone starts to emerge from Zhao's body. Zhao, with an evil look, also says that of course Minghe will also become the great hero of the city if he manages to defeat Mutant Zhao. Zhao starts spinning the red bone he pulled from his body, while saying it's a shame Minghe is so weak. Zhao starts saying he heard comments that Minghe was hospitalized soon after not passing the test, since in the test he had gotten the rank White Dust, which is the worst of all. Zhao remembers Minghe hospitalized while saying that, apparently, he didn't face reality, and that's why he ended up in a coma, ending up in the hospital where Zhao worked. Zhao even mentions that he remembers Minghe lying under devices, and that, by a great coincidence, It was Zhao who performed all the surgery to save Minghe's life. Zhao, with an insane smile, says that from all this, Minghe is just a mere human who is a failure, who failed the exam to become a hunter. He says this while delivering a blow with the red bone, just grazing Minghe's head. Zhao still provokes, saying that no one expects much from him. Minghe's classmates also don't expect anything from him. Zhao, excited, prepares several sharp red bones while saying that Minghe's classmates laugh at him, at his stupidity. Zhao says that no one cares about him, except for the teacher who forced everyone to bring flowers to him. Zhao says this as he throws all those red bones at once. Minghe, silent, manages to dodge all the bones with extreme ease. Zhao, trying to shake Minghe, continues to launch several bones while saying that none of Minghe's classmates cared about him. After all, no one visited him throughout an entire year. Minghe continues trying to dodge the bones, some piercing his shirt. Zhao takes the opportunity to continue his provocation, saying that Minghe has lived a sad life up to that point. Another bone nearly hits his face, while Zhao still says that even with all this, Minghe wants to act arrogant, trying to be a hero. Lin, seeing all this, screams for Minghe to please run away. Minghe doesn't realize what's happening, but Zhao, in all his insanity, is already on top of him ready to deliver a fatal blow. Minghe jumps back with all his strength. However, he was hit in his chest, which starts bleeding quite a bit. Zhao just stands in front of Minghe. Lin begins to cry, asking Minghe to run away while it's still possible. Minghe is on his knees, bleeding heavily. He then gets up while pressing his wound to try to stop the bleeding a bit. Mutant Zhao, with an insane appearance, begins to lick Minghe's blood off his weapon and asks Minghe why he resists so much. After all, he should have died on the operating table a year ago. Zhao starts running towards Minghe while saying that even if he awakens at that moment, nothing will change. Minghe then prepares himself and looks at those spikes surrounding him. However, he starts to remember that Zhao made it clear that if Minghe steps out of the arena's boundaries, he will kill all of Minghe's classmates. And this was no joke. Zhao gets even closer to deliver the final blow while taunting Minghe, saying he shouldn't even exist in that world. Minghe keeps holding his chest while a lot of blood flows onto his hand. Mutant Zhao, now with a frenetic smile, delivers his last attack, telling Minghe to die once and for all. Minghe throws his blood-filled hand into Mutant Zhao's eyes, causing him to have to close his eyes. Minghe takes the chance and jumps away from Mutant Zhao, while he screams in hatred, calling Minghe a filthy rat. Minghe breaks his jump. Zhao tries to look back, but can't open his eyes. Minghe starts moving towards Zhao and delivers a powerful punch to his head, while still accumulating a huge amount of energy in his blood-covered fists and saying that Zhao is filthy trash, a disgusting and despicable person. Minghe's fists are covered in blood, and because of this, Minghe observes that his own blood is one of the best supports for the fist technique. He says this right after delivering that blow to Zhao, saying that the blow was from the bloodthirsty demon fists. Mutant Zhao is thrown onto his own spikes, piercing his entire body. The people at the top of the ride start screaming, saying that Minghe was incredible, but he should hurry up and kill the mutant once and for all. Zheng, in shock, cries and begs Minghe to save him first at all costs, because his blood is drying up, so he will undoubtedly die. Xiaodan watches everyone there crying and says that Minghe is clearly bleeding more than him, so clearly Zheng is just a coward. Lin, also crying a lot, asks Minghe to take care of his own wounds first, since it's obvious he's bleeding a lot. At that moment, a bone falls to the ground while someone says that those people are very noisy. It was Zhao, who was pulling out the bones that had pierced his body. He removes them while saying that after finishing with Minghe, he will tear all those fearful rats to pieces. Everyone at the top of the ride is speechless, terrified by that threat. Mutant Zhao finally stands up while removing the last bone that pierced his body. He asks Minghe if his fists are the talent of the advanced evolution he possesses. Minghe hears this and immediately delivers another powerful punch to the face of Mutant Zhao, not giving him time to defend himself. Zhao just turns his face as he takes the blow and says that it seems the fists are indeed very strong. However, Zhao then moves his neck and says that despite being strong, they are completely useless. Zhao also remembers that during Minghe's battle with the demonic rat on the stone bridge, he used his flaming fists. He begins to recall the entire fight that Minghe had against the demonic rat. While Zhao was thinking about this, Minghe was gathering more and more energy in his fist, which was still under the effect of his blood. After gathering a lot of energy, he begins to deliver dozens of punches all over Mutant Zhao's body, one punch stronger than the other, until he finishes his last blow by putting all his strength into it. Zhao starts to be thrown away and slides to the other side of the arena. Mutant Zhao, after receiving all those punches, tells Mingyi that it appears he is capable of absorbing different supports, producing different effects on his punches. Zhao finds that power extraordinary. Zhao starts to clean himself up, already healed from the blows, while saying that this is not enough to kill a leader rank like him. Xing Hong, observing Zhao say all this, asks Xiaodan if the talent of advanced evolution Mingyi has isn't an invisible power of white dust rank. Moreover, his other power is pure luck, and that can't be used in battle. Xiaodan replies that he has no idea about any of that. The only certainty is that Mingyi is stronger than all of them up there. Xiaodan shouts to Mingyi, asking him to use even more of his strength, and with that, he will kill that monster. Mutant Zhao begins to walk towards Mingyi, and as he approaches him, says that he is leveraging the strength of a leader rank monster at that very moment, not the strength of a cockroach or worm that Mingyi killed. He also says that with those mediocre fists alone, it will not be possible to win that battle. Zhao also says that this feeling of clearly giving your best and still losing must be very unpleasant. Zhao raises his arms excitedly and says that as extraordinary as Mingyi may be, he continues to be very weak. Having said that, how would he want to compare himself to a perfect body like Zhao's? Zhao then raises his hand while Mingyi just stands there doing nothing. He then closes his hand, saying that Mingyi is not the only one who has strong fists. Mingyi opens his eyes expecting Zhao to attack him. Zhao, without wasting time, throws a punch towards Mingyi. Mingyi also delivers a punch to block the punch coming his way. However, the impact of the punch was so strong that it threw Mingyi several meters back. Mutant Zhao does not waste time and starts running at full speed towards Mingyi. He begins to deliver countless attacks, while Mingyi alternates between dodging and blocking the attacks as best he can. Mingyi is thrown back amid the dust raised by Zhao's strikes. At that moment, Mingyi imagines that as soon as Mutant Zhao began using his fists, his speed increased significantly. The dust remains dense until Zhao emerges from it, going towards Mingyi to deliver another powerful punch. He lands the punch squarely on Mingyi's belly, which he couldn't dodge this time. The punch was so strong that it sent Mingyi flying far away. Zhao, smiling for having the upper hand in the fight, tells Mingyi to be careful with what comes next. At that moment, spikes start to emerge from Zhao's body. The spikes grow larger until all of them are fired towards Mingyi. The spikes speed towards Mingyi while he just crosses his arms trying to defend himself in case any hit him. Mutant Zhao can't believe it, as several bones flew towards Mingyi, yet none hit him even though he didn't move. Mingyi then falls to the ground and feels relieved that he wasn't pierced by any of those bones. Zhao starts to smile as he pulls another bone from his body, remembering another extraordinary talent that Mingyi has, which is luck. Zhao says it doesn't matter anymore, since Mingyi is hanging by a thread. All Zhao needs to do is deliver just one more attack, and even if Mingyi survives, he will probably be crippled by this next attack. Zhao praises, saying that this luck talent is really quite useful. Zhao then pulls a huge bone from his arm and aims it at Mingyi's classmates, saying he wants to see if they are as lucky as Mingyi. Desperate, Mingyi yells at Zhao asking what he is doing. After all, they had an agreement. Zhao Mutante looked at Mingyi, stating that he always keeps his promises. Mingyi notices he's outside the arena due to the strong blow he took. Zhao immediately launches one of his thorns towards the people, saying that someone will die due to Mingyi's incompetence. People start screaming in desperation, fearing for their lives. At that moment, Lin is paralyzed, the thorn coming towards them. The thorn Zhou Mutant threw hits Lin's chest squarely, blood spraying everywhere. She tries to utter Mingyi's name but is powerless, her chest pierced. Lin then faints, drained of strength. Mingyi looks up, unable to believe what's happening. He then lowers his head, stating that Zhao Mutante will pay dearly for this. Mingyi becomes completely furious, shouting that Zhao is a complete bastard for what he did. Mingyi can't control his anger. Zhao remains looking up, asking Mingyi not to get upset. After all, he as a doctor recommends removing the bone, or else Lin won't die immediately. Zhao still mocks, saying that if she doesn't receive immediate treatment, she'll definitely die within the next 5 minutes. Mingyi, with his eyes red, just walks towards Zhao's thorns. He plunges his hand into the thorns and then clenches his fist, breaking them while blood gushes onto his hand. Mingyi, brimming with immense power, begins walking towards Zhao. Mingyi was extremely furious. Mingyi shouts that for the next 5 minutes all he will do is kill Zhao. Mingyi starts running at full speed towards Zhao, and Zhao does the same, running towards Mingyi. Mingyi lands the first punch on Zhao, but Zhao taunts that ultimately that extraordinary strength is at most at the blue spirit rank. Zhao delivers a strong punch to Mingyi's face and even says that even if Mingyi surpasses all limits, it still won't be enough. Minghe starts attacking Zhao frantically, while Zhao says he'll prove he's right, and lets Minghe attack him since he'll die anyway. Minghe struggles and tries to attack as much as he can. Zhao, with a diabolical face, comments to Minghe, saying that doctors hate it when patients survive a suicide attempt. The two engage in an intense exchange of blows, and Zhao taunts that apparently Minghe wants to die at all costs, failed to die in the hospital to die there in the park. Zhao, with a sinister expression, points his finger at Minghe, saying that nobody cares about him because he's useless and weak. Zhao says that Minghe's sister had to humiliate herself when she fell behind on hospital bills. Zhao says that Minghe's sister and he are the scum of society and only exist to do the hard work for the rich people of the city. Zhao, at this moment, delivers a powerful punch to Minghe's face and taunts, saying he still has the courage to act almighty. Zhao crouches down and tells Minghe he'll end his pitiful life. Zhao then leaps high while clasping his hands, saying he'll finish everything at that moment. At that moment, thorns emerge from Zhao's hands, and he's ready to finish off Minghe on the ground, calling him an insignificant insect. Zhao, with his fists clenched, descends towards the ground, ready to destroy everything. He hits the ground hard, causing a huge explosion at the impact site. In addition to the explosion, several thorns start emerging from the ground due to Zhao's explosive power ability. Zhao remains crouched, overflowing with immense power. Zhao looks ahead and gets irritated with what he sees. He comments that apparently Minghe wants all his friends to die since he's out of the arena once again. Minghe at that moment was outside, having to jump back to escape that wave of thorns. Zhao, smiling, says it's a pity, as every time Minghe survives, one of his friends has to die. Minghe, enraged, looks at Zhao and says he never tried to kill himself. After all, he values his own life very much. Zhao begins licking his own thorn and says it doesn't matter anymore, and now since he's out of the arena, it'll be his friends who will pay anyway. Minghe says that the person nobody cares about isn't him, it's Zhao. Minghe also says that his sister did all that solely because she cares about her family. Minghe remembers his sister visiting him even when he was in a coma, and saying she'll keep visiting, even if she has to do it for a lifetime. Minghe also remembers when the mutations occurred. Everyone fled except Nurse Song, who stayed for a patient who had been in a coma for a year. He also says that Nurse Song did everything not to leave him behind, even knowing the chances of that happening were almost nil. Minghe also remembers Lin asking the whole group to help him. Minghe says he won't abandon his colleagues since Lin took the initiative and asked for donations from all the colleagues. Zhao looks up towards Lin and tells Minghe that all that is nice, but what will he do for the girl? After all, she's about to die. Minghe then becomes serious and says that his extraordinary power is not just a blue spirit rank talent. Minghe then starts gathering energy in his fists and says he doesn't care about Zhao's regeneration. The punches will leave marks anyway. Minghe, looking at Zhao's body, says there will be a total of 49 punches. Zhao gets worried about that. Zhao, at that moment, stands before several giant fists, as if they were spirits. Minghe then faces Zhao squarely and says that this is the ultimate secret. Minghe, with his eyes shining, goes after Zhao with his numerous fists, shouting that this is his scar fist technique. Zhao is shocked by this, imagining that this is the justice of the Supreme Soul, definitely an extraordinary talent of purple soul rank. Zhao, seeing all those punches coming towards him, can't believe that someone as powerful as him will lose to a brat like Minghe. Those numerous blue punches hit Zhao's entire body squarely, causing a huge explosion at the scene. People watching from the amusement ride are completely impressed by the immense power coming from Minghe. Minghe stands before the crater formed by his technique and says that he is truly insignificant. Minghe then stands up and says that, regardless of what happens, he will still be thousands of times stronger than trash like Zhao. Minghe starts running towards the ride, and his colleagues are surprised that Minghe can use the Supreme Soul Justice. Xiaodan, crying, thanks Minghe and asks if the Academy is blind for not accepting someone so powerful. Xiaodan and Xinghong say that Minghe is very powerful, and definitely the testing system failed, or at least whoever evaluated the exam failed Minghe on purpose. Minghe, at that moment, wasn't listening to anything. He was just in front of Lin. Lin, extremely injured because of the thorn in her chest, asks Minghe if she's going to die by any chance. Minghe replies that she won't, as the officials were already on their way to help her. Lin smiles and says that Minghe is really strong, and none of her friends knew that. Zhang smiles worriedly, realizing that it's true. At this moment, Xinghong and Xiaodan spot something and say that the officials finally arrived. Everyone starts shouting for the officials while Minghe asks Lin not to speak at that moment until the rescue arrives. A rescue squad arrives accompanied by Commander Galen. She tells them to hurry and leave the injured person with her, and for her partner to take care of the danger. The colleagues ask them to hurry while the doctors ask everyone to move aside since professional help has arrived. The doctor informs that the spear hasn't been removed, so that's a good thing. The commander quickly sees Mingyi extremely injured and asks to examine his wounds. The commander informs that as they approached, they felt a powerful leader-rank energy coming from there, so Mingyi was lucky not to die there. The commander also asks about the leader-rank mutant. Where did he flee? A person approaches the scene. It was Qingyu, who is of solar rank. He informs that the danger has already been eliminated. The commander asks Qingyu not to be so hasty on his first mission. She turns around and says that the leader-rank mutant may well be hiding, preparing an ambush while they are there talking. Qingyu points to the side of the crater and says that this mutant is already dead. He also says that the body is inside that hole where smoke is coming out. Qingyu also informs that apparently it was a mutated human who used the polluted source to mutate himself. Zhao was completely mutilated at that moment. The commander is in disbelief, asking, "How dead?" She desperately starts looking around, asking how that mutant died. After all, who was powerful enough to kill him? Everyone points towards Mingyi, saying he was responsible for such feat. Mingyi was being bandaged at that moment. The commander rushes to him and asks if it was really him. Mingyi tells her it was him, and that his name is Mingyi, and that he was the one who called for help. Mingyi also takes out the flask and shows it to the commander, saying that he stole that polluted source from Dr. Zhao. Commander Gellin looks closely at the flask with pink liquid, and then panics, asking how he was able to do all that. Mingyi starts telling how he waited for him to be distracted and then stole it. She says she's not talking about that. She wants to know how he managed to defeat a leader-rank mutant. Mingyi, all bruised up, just says he used his fists. The doctor gets furious because Mingyi won't stay still. The commander is left puzzled and asks what his rank is and to which department he belongs. Mingyi replies that he's of initial stellar rank. The commander gets irritated, saying that was some damn lie. She asks if he knows that moments before that mutant killed 2 lunar rank people. Xiaodan approaches and says that Mingyi has just become extraordinary. The doctor informs that the treatment is over, and Mingyi just thanks him. Xiaodan informs that even Mingyi failed the admission test. The commander then is surprised to hear that and then shouts, "If he was that person?" Qingyu stares at Mingyi while Mingyi asks, "How was he?" The commander says he's the guy on the other end of the walkie-talkie, who is an extremely arrogant and disobedient student. The doctor approaches, asking if he's not the guy who saved everyone from the hospital against the demon rat. He remembers the name Mingyi, but didn't know the person well, as they were covered in blood. Qingyu puts his hand on Mingyi's shoulder and then says that apparently now he is the hero of Lanyang City in its time of need. Qingyu jokes, saying that Mingyi turned high-ranking extraordinaries into mere extras. Mingyi says he didn't do anything special. He was just protecting his colleagues and acquaintances. The commander, pleased, asks if Mingyi is interested in joining them. He says he will be well treated. Besides, his new colleagues are as beautiful as she is. Qingyu finds that strange and asks where her dignity went for saying that. The commander gets stressed and asks what's the problem. Qingyu feels awkward and says that the commander and her colleagues are in completely different worlds. The commander then asks what Mingyi thinks. After all, the academy didn't accept him, but the governmental organization is wanting to recruit him at that moment. Mingyi, tired, asks to let him think for a bit about it. He says this again as he starts to fall backwards. Qingyu and the commander start shouting, asking what's happening. They rush to Mingyi, and a doctor starts treating him quickly. The doctor informs that Mingyi fainted from exhaustion and lost a lot of blood. Still at night, the commander asks for him to be transferred to the hospital immediately, and also for everyone to prepare for the press conference. The news then starts airing on TV talking about the incident. The reporter informs that the southern area of Lanyang City has been completely cleared of mutants. She also informs that there was a specific extraordinary who contributed greatly to the success of the mission, finding the source of pollution. The reporter informs that this hero who saved the city is currently hospitalized but is recovering well. She informs that they will have an exclusive interview with him as soon as he wakes up. Now, at the Lanyang City Hospital, Nurse Song is by the bed where Mingyi is hospitalized. Mingyi finally wakes up. The nurse then becomes happy, saying that he finally woke up. Nurse Song informs Mingyi that he slept for 2 full days and nights. Mingyi asks what she's doing there. Nurse Song informs that she made a special request to be transferred there so she could take care of him. She then smiles and says that he's now the hero of the city, and there are several reporters outside waiting to interview him. Mingyi says it's okay but asks where Lin is. And how is she? Nurse Song informs that Lin is still being treated, but at that moment her life is out of danger. Song also informs that if Lin continues at the hospital, she will slowly recover completely. Minghee says it's a relief to hear that. At that moment, someone opens the door asking how Minghee is. It was Commander Gilin accompanied by General Lee. The general asks if Minghee is feeling better. Minghee informs that he's feeling fine and that it wasn't anything serious. Nurse Song informs General Lee that Minghee's physique is incredible, so he will recover very quickly. Commander Galen says that's very good, and Minghee definitely fits into their organization. General Lee taps his foot on the ground and gets Minghee's attention. The general informs that Minghee alone uncovered Zhao's entire plot, and also stopped the disaster before it affected the entire city. The general and the commander bend down and say that on behalf of the city's governmental organization, they thank Minghee for everything he did. Minghee asks them not to worry about it. After all, he only did what needed to be done. The general continues to stare at Minghee. Minghee looks back at General Lee. At this moment, the commander tells Song that they have the day off, so they could go out at that moment to eat something. Song agrees to that. The commander then starts taking Song outside, leaving General Lee talking to Minghee. The general then sits on the chair. Minghee immediately asks the general if there's any particular matter to discuss and what it would be. The general asks how he found out about that. Minghee says he noticed that the commander made up something just to get Nurse Song out of the room. The general laughs, saying that Minghee has a good perception. The general says he heard about the battle for Minghee's friends, and apparently, in terms of strength, Minghee was no match for mutant Zhao. The general also says that apparently Minghee turned the tables even while being at such a disadvantage. He further comments that several extraordinaries are mistaken in thinking that the higher the rank, the more powerful the person is. General Lee informs that reality is not quite like that. After all, extraordinaries need to fully use their abilities and also apply their knowledge, and Minghee was very good at that. Minghee says that probably all of that is because of his luck talent since he is luckier than most. The general says he doesn't need to be modest. After all, luck will ensure safety sometimes, but for the time Minghee fought, there's no way luck alone was responsible for the victory. Minghee bows his head and says he's getting too much credit without deserving it. The general asks Minghee what exactly he heard from Dr. Zhao. Minghee informs that he heard something about humanity being the cancer of the universe. Zhao also said that these invading creatures were the celestial authority of the main group of the universe's immune system and such delusions. After Minghee tells General Lee everything, he is surprised by that and says that all of that was not completely nonsensical. Minghee, confused, asks how such delusions aren't nonsensical. The general informs that several meteors that came to Earth and contained life within represented a future threat to humanity. He further says that all living things have instincts, and the primary instinct is to survive. The general asks if Minghee knows what the first instinct of these scourges was. Minghee says it's to kill. The general gets up and says that's right, the instinct to eradicate all of humanity. Minghee then asks if humanity really is a cancerous cell of the universe. The general goes to the table to get some water and says that survival is the first instinct, followed by exploration, and because of that, he wouldn't be able to adequately answer Minghee's question, as they are still in the exploration stage. General Lee starts pouring a glass of water and says that even the strongest rankers and cosmologists would be unable to answer such a question. Minghee says that if the universe wanted to eliminate humanity, it would never have endowed them with those abilities. After all, those abilities make humanity's power equal to that of the scourges. The general says that's exactly it. The existence of extraordinaries is evidence of this theory. Therefore, perhaps they are even curing the universe of the invading scourges. The general puts his hand on his chest and says they will never be brought down by the scourges, and that the extraordinaries will keep civilization going strong. Minghee, with the glass of water in his hand, says he likes being an extraordinary, even though he can't protect all of humanity. He looks at his glass and says he wants to protect at least the people close to him. The general says to end that conversation, he just wants to confirm two things and asks Minghee to be completely honest. He hands some papers to Minghee and says that last year a meteor was detected and named Goddess. The general informs that the meteor, as soon as it entered the atmosphere, simply changed its trajectory completely out of nowhere. And coincidentally, one of the meteor fragments hit Minghee, knocking him unconscious for a whole year. Minghee, holding the report of the incident, says he now understands what really happened to him. General Lee then asks what Minghee saw when he was hit. Minghee then says he only saw a blinding light covering the sky when he was riding his motorcycle. Minghee stared at the light and noticed something getting closer to him. After that, Minghee says he simply lost consciousness. The general then asks if he really didn't see anything. If something came out of the meteor as soon as it fell, for example. Mingyi informs that no, he passed out as soon as he was hit. Mingyi asks if by any chance a terrifying scourge could have come out of that meteor. The general goes to the window and says they categorized the scourges from 1 to 12 ranks. He says that a calamity of rank 1 isn't even as strong as a natural disaster like a tornado. The general informs that the scourges that appeared in the southern city were classified as rank 3. As for Zhao, with all his purpose, he would be a calamity of rank 6, but was defeated in time. Mingyi despairs and asks how such serious calamities were classified only as rank 3. The general informs that the meteor they were observing, just in the initial stages of observation, they would easily classify it as a calamity of rank 9. It was something that would be unprecedented. Mingyi is completely frightened to hear that something of that kind would be rank 9. General Li informs that the destructive capacity would be something like the entire southern area of China. Mingyi finds that terrifying. The general says that the meteor itself isn't scary, but what could be inside it. The general informs that 5 years ago, an 8-rank calamity emerged, and it came from a meteor being classified as an emperor-rank beast. He also says that the source of pollution from that flask was actually a sample of this beast. The general also informs that at the time, there were merchants in the underworld who possessed that blood. Mingyi is shocked, since only a sample of the beast was capable of all that destruction. The general informs that it's precisely because of the meteor goddess that there may be something threatening the entire existence of humanity. The restless general says that the government continued to analyze the crater caused by the meteor, but they found nothing, and the only witness was Mingyi, who was in a coma. He also says that's why he asked those questions. Mingyi apologizes for not being much help. The general says it's no problem. Perhaps this thing could have fallen in another region, or even in another state from another fragment of the meteor. Mingyi takes the opportunity to ask what the other matter the general would like to discuss was. The general informs that Luo Lin kept recommending all the time for Mingyi to join the government organization of extraordinaries. The general leans on the bed and comments that Mingyi's luck ability is truly incredible. After all, it brought many good things like those extraordinary fists. Mingyi agrees with that. The general then asks what Mingyi thinks about joining them. Mingyi says he still doesn't know. After all, he still needs to talk to his sister. General Li says it's okay. Anyway, the organization will always have its doors open to him. The general begins to leave the room, saying he will let Mingyi rest in peace. At that moment, Mingyi asks the general to wait a moment. The general quickly turns around, asking if Mingyi remembered something important. Mingyi feels embarrassed, and asks if by any chance there wouldn't be the prize of 20,000 yuan for him having found the source of pollution. General Li bursts out laughing, telling Mingyi to relax, that without a doubt, he will receive the prize without a penny less. Mingyi then thanks him, and the general leaves the room. Mingyi says it's time for his meditation training. Mingyi closes his eyes, and suddenly, he's in another place. Mingyi starts walking towards a statue and asks if it heard everything the general just said. The statue remains silent. Suddenly the statue looks down, and then a huge light comes out of the statue towards the sky. Mingyi shields himself from that strong light. A huge woman then emerges from that statue. At that moment, Mingyi asks if she is the rank 9 calamity. The woman begins to shrink in size, heading towards Mingyi and saying, "Who does he think she is to be underestimated like that?" The woman informs that she is at least rank 11. Mingyi, looking at her, asks if she's really there to eradicate humanity. She says probably yes. After all, Mingyi heard the doctor say, and what he said is true. After all, humans are selfish and greedy. Mingyi starts descending the stairs, saying then that's one more reason not to let her out. Mingyi sits down, and the goddess says that Mingyi is very despicable because she granted him an extraordinary physical ability. The goddess also says that she offered her own space for Mingyi to train even in a coma. After all, how else would Mingyi have defeated Zhao? Mingyi says they are just in a symbiotic relationship. If Mingyi dies, she dies. The goddess says it's a shame the accident happened that day. Otherwise, she wouldn't need to inhabit his body since he's extremely weak. Mingyi says none of that matters, since even though he's weak, she chose to be in a symbiotic relationship with him. She tells him not to compare her to those low-level calamities. After all, she is a supreme being. She is a goddess. She approaches Mingyi and says it's almost impossible to find a suitable host. One of them would need to go through a long period of adaptation. Mingyi himself needed a whole year to adapt to the changes. Mingyi says the ability of the fists is compensation for that whole year. The goddess says it's all right. They just need to live in peace. Mingyi says that since her instinct is to survive, then she's just like humans. She asks what he means by that. Mingyi, looking up, says she also doesn't understand the universe. She's just following some will. Minghee asks her to let him introduce the world to her. Perhaps it will change her way of thinking. There's the beautiful side and the ugly side, but she would like it. Besides being beautiful and cute, undoubtedly, they would get along very well. The goddess slaps Minghee's hand, saying that before that, he needs to work hard and train for her. After all, Minghee was almost defeated by a mere pseudo-lord rank, and it would be ridiculous for her to die in that way. He asks what a pseudo-lord is. The goddess opens her system and says she will summon some strong opponents for Minghee to face in order to train a bit. Minghee lies down and says he's tired and needs to rest. With his eyes closed, he imagines that he can barely meditate. He continues with his eyes closed until suddenly he opens them. He becomes serious thinking about the rank 9 calamity. Minghee puts his hand on his chest and imagines that he harbors a nuclear bomb inside him, and that if anyone finds out, it will explode immediately, causing a disaster to follow. Minghee looks out the window and imagines that if he can change the goddess's way of thinking, then it would be the same as solving the problem of the rank 9 calamity. Minghee's focus is now on that. Outside the hospital, several reporters were in a frenzy awaiting Minghee's arrival. They were fighting among themselves to see who could get an exclusive interview. Minghee finally leaves the hospital, and the reporters immediately approach, asking why he's wearing a mask. They ask Minghee to remove the mask so they can see who the young hero of the city is. Several reporters crowd around Minghee, suffocating him. Minghee lowers his head and takes a deep breath. He says he was just doing his best to protect those close to him. And also the main forces were the government organization and the Extraordinary Academy, as well as the Hunters Association. Lin listens to the interview, and at that moment, Minghee says that everyone who set foot in the southern city are heroes. Xiao Dan, Xing Hong, and Zheng also listen to the interview and say that Minghee spoke very nicely. Several people were listening to the interview, as well as people in the cemetery visiting those who died in that tragedy. Kaishuan continues to cry after hearing Minghee say that everyone who set foot in Nanjiao are heroes. Everyone is a hero of the city. Kaishuan kneels over the graves and asks Huang Feng and Xiaolan if they heard that their squad are also heroes of the city. She says this while crying a lot for the death of her friends. Minghee is now in the park. He thinks it's better not to appear too much in public, otherwise he'll end up being kidnapped by a research lab. He sees the notification that the 20,000 yuan has been deposited into his account. Minghee celebrates that he's finally rich, and then his sister won't need to work so hard anymore. Minghee goes to where his sister is working and thinks it was good to ask Nurse Song not to tell that he was hospitalized. After all, his sister wouldn't even be able to sleep. Qing Yu spots Minghee and asks what he's doing there. Minghee happily says that the government gave him a lot of money, so he asks her to take a break because he'll treat her to a feast. Qing Yu says she can't because the ice creams won't be fresh tomorrow and asks him to save the money because he might need it in the future. Minghee then approaches her and says he'll help her then since they can eat together later. She asks why he's not studying instead of wasting his time there. Qing Yu says she heard about a hero who saved the city, so Minghee should be inspired by that person to become a powerful extraordinary who saves people. Minghee feels embarrassed because that hero is him, but his sister doesn't know. Minghee just says the doctor asked him to get some fresh air, so he decided to come there. Minghee then starts helping his sister sell the ice creams. Commander Galen is watching Minghee from afar. She thinks he could have all the fame in the world as a celebrity, but he chose to reject all the media and ran to where his sister is to help her. Galen says that Minghee is truly a good kid. Minghee continues shouting to promote the ice creams, and at that moment his phone rings. He answers and asks who it is. The person says it's Luo Lin, the commander of the Nanjiao forces. Minghee says, "Oh, it's you." Luo Lin comments on Minghee joining the government organization and asks if he has thought about it. Minghee says that at the moment, he only thought about how hard his sister is working to pay his bills. Minghee informs that he wishes to join the Extraordinary Academy and graduate from the special recruitment program as soon as the tests begin. Luo Lin says he is right to think like that. After all, he is still young. Minghee says that right after graduating, he definitely wants to join the government organization. Luo Lin comments that the government organization also has a department called Dragon's Tooth. This department consists of freelance agents with flexible schedules who can also join other organizations. She further explains that she will not limit his freedom. After all, he decides whether to participate in missions or not. Additionally, he will receive a scholarship if he participates at least twice a year. Minghee says that regardless of how things go, they can count on him if they need help, as it is the responsibility of the extraordinary to serve the country. Luo Lin says she will interpret that as a yes, and informs him that he is now a special agent of Dragon's Tooth. She's looking forward to working with him. The protagonist smiles and says he is too. Some time passed with that conversation. Mingyi finally finished his call. His sister approaches, saying she has finally finished her shift and asks who called him. Mingyi responds that it was an official organization. He also informs her that he got a part-time job that pays very well in addition to his salary, so she no longer needs to work from that moment on. Moreover, he will buy a new house for them. She is surprised by all this. They start walking as she says they need to eat out to celebrate, preferably fish for dinner. Mingyi thinks it's an excellent idea. The two continue eating everything they come across. Later, Mingyi takes his sister to buy some clothes. He then shows her the house they will live in. The two go to the balcony. Mingyi comments that although the house is rented, he is happy nonetheless, and that soon he will be able to buy a new house. His sister is just happy with everything. She turns and asks Mingyi to thank the city's hero for her when he meets him. Mingyi asks what she means. She says it is important to thank everyone, especially since she learned that this hero risked his life fighting a stronger mutant to protect people's lives. She comments that he could have fled but stayed fighting until the end. She also says she heard rumors that the entire body of that extraordinary person was covered in blood and that he almost died during the fight. Qin Yu further says that the children in the amusement park, this new comfortable house, or even the peaceful life in the city, are only possible thanks to these extraordinary individuals. She puts her hand on her brother's shoulder and asks that when he meets this hero, he thanks him for her. He responds that he will definitely remember that. The protagonist then decides to take a bath. After finishing the bath, he imagines that his sister didn't need to thank him. After all, he would risk every fiber of his being to protect her. From that moment on, Mingyi began to train hard, starting with the center. After that, he moved on to strength training. Then, he began his physical endurance training. After that, he went on to combat techniques training. He also dedicated himself to gaining a lot of knowledge, reading many books. He then closes the book and imagines that he now needs practical training. He begins to meditate to meet with the goddess. Already within his mind, in the domain of the goddess, she summons a copy of Dr. Zhao with 90% of the original's power. She says she will use it for Mingyi to have his simulated battle. He responds that it's fine since he hasn't forgiven him yet. The goddess informs him that he needs to evolve his body a lot, since his mind is very strong, but his body can't keep up. She sees Mingyi's statistics based on humanity, where he was classified as white dust. She says that his level is actually lunar rank, and with a little effort he will, at the very least, reach solar rank. Mingyi continues his simulated battle against mutant Zhao. He asks the goddess if, by mastering the solar rank, he will be able to use the absolute domain of Zhuan fists. She responds that yes, his Zhuan fists will reach red honor. The protagonist continues his fight against the simulated Zhao, while the goddess explains that when he unleashes the absolute domain, he will realize that Dr. Zhao was just an insect. Mingyi comments that he indeed remembers a teacher saying something like that. He remembers the teacher explaining about talents and that humans have the ability to break their limits. The protagonist recalls when he took the test and confirmed that his talent is having exceptional fists. He explains that with the blue spirit talent, the user has a white dust physique and a superpower like pyrokinesis or even wind manipulation. Mingyi's talent, however, is the explosive fist. He explains that with the purple soul talent, the user has an extraordinary physique and supreme-level spiritual arts, such as the Call of Flames, Dancing Thunder, and even the Spinning Cyclone. Mingyi says that his specific talent is the Scar Punch technique, where several punch spirits appear in the air. He remembers asking the teacher about Red Honor talents, but she informed him that he needs to first enter the Extraordinary Institute before learning about that. The goddess explains that with Red Honor, the user has the foundation of all other ranks, from White Dust to Purple Soul, and they also have Absolute Domain. Essentially, with Absolute Domain, powers increase drastically, as if you decide the rules of the battle. It's like a game where you set the rules, the goddess commented. Mingyi continues fighting mutant Zhao while listening to the goddess's explanations. He says he would like to experience this absolute domain and asks if she can simulate it for him. She says no, and informs him that he needs to first enhance his supreme soul. After all, he hasn't yet adapted to the purple soul talent, so there's no chance for him to see the Red Honor. The protagonist then takes a deep breath and invokes his Scar Punch technique. He explains that this supreme art needs to leave a sufficient number of marks on the enemy, and that fortunately, he managed to leave 49 punch marks on Zhao's body. Otherwise, he would definitely die. He takes the opportunity to ask if the Scar Punch technique is stronger when more marks are left. The goddess responds that yes, the minimum for activating this ability is 49 marks. She looks at Mingi and says the punches must be strong and precise. Additionally, he can use the surroundings for support. He can even use the explosive fist to leave more marks. The protagonist becomes more serious upon hearing her say that if he continues like this, he will soon be able to use the supreme art of the Zhuan fists. A month passes, and Mingi is saying goodbye to his sister as he is traveling to the city of Nandu. He says he will just take a test and then return. In the city of Nandu, in the industrial zone, a thick fog can be seen. The fog gets denser. Near the gate, the intense fog is visible, and it is also red. A man guarding the place has his flashlight on and says that in all his years working there, he has never seen such a thick fog. One of the guards tells the other that it is hard to see because the fog is so dense. The guard finds it strange, as it's not even September yet, and it's already so cold. They continue walking back. They find it odd because, with how much they've walked, they should have already reached the factory. The rookie asks Mr. Wang if they might have taken the wrong turn. Wang responds that it's impossible since he has been walking there for 10 years, so he wouldn't get lost even with his eyes closed. They shine the flashlight on a building and ask how they ended up there. Mr. Wang points his flashlight and asks if what he is seeing is a person, making a strange sound. The guard is completely terrified by what he sees. The rookie is being devoured by a giant spider beast. Wang panics and starts running desperately from there, while the rookie is devoured by the beast. After running a lot, Wang reaches the control room extremely exhausted. He takes out his cell phone to call for help. As he does this, he notices someone through the door glass. He shouts to the woman that it's dangerous to stay there. She needs to run away quickly. As he gets closer, he comes face to face with a horrible monster. The monster grabs the guard with its enormous hair, sucking all his life energy, leaving him a mere skin and bones. Inside the factory, there are enormous structures. A monster passes by, and its colossal height is visible. A person was hiding, watching that monster walk. The woman watched the giant monster walking through the factory. She put her hand over her mouth and started to cry, unable to believe what she was seeing. At that moment, Mingi was traveling by train. He was talking on the phone with his sister, saying that he had found someone to find a house for him. A flight attendant passed by two women, one of whom asked for a glass of water, and inquired how much longer until they reached Nandu. The attendant replied that it would be about an hour. She took the opportunity to ask if she was taking her daughter to enroll in the school in Nandu. The mother, looking at her daughter, said yes. She added that her daughter, Nianrong, had achieved the highest score in the city of Lanyang. The attendant remarked that it was incredible and that she had not imagined her daughter was extraordinary. People around heard the conversation and were amazed that there was such a talented person on the train. A man in the front seat asked Nianrong for an autograph for good luck, as he wished to become an extraordinary person to protect the city in the future. Minghe observed her and thought she was truly incredible, having achieved the highest scores through her own efforts, while he had to enter through the back door. The train continued its journey until, suddenly, it braked abruptly, out of nowhere. A woman holding her child panicked, trying to keep her daughter from getting hurt. The protagonist quickly placed his hand on the child's head to cushion the impact. He managed to do this while the woman was completely terrified, imagining the worst. Nianrong noticed this action and said that the boy had a very quick reaction. Everyone on the train was worried about why it had stopped so suddenly. After all, a dense fog had formed as soon as the train stopped, which was concerning. Minghe took out his phone and saw that the weather forecast was for clear skies, but there was clearly a dense fog outside. He raised his phone and lamented that there was apparently no signal in that location. A child noticed something outside and called his mother, saying that something was outside the train. His mother told him not to talk nonsense. The child insisted it was true. Minghe continued observing around without understanding what was happening. Something approached the train. At that moment, Minghe heard an announcement informing that the train was being inspected and asking everyone to fasten their seatbelts for safety. Everyone began to panic, not knowing what was really happening. Minghe decided to get up to check what had happened. The attendant asked Minghe to sit down to avoid causing unnecessary trouble. Minghe just wanted to know what was happening. She replied that a team was already inspecting the situation. Minghe presented his card and informed her that he was extraordinary, so if something had happened, he needed to know. The attendant said she didn't know he was one and asked him to follow her. At that moment, Nianrong approached, saying that she was a half-extraordinary, so in times of crisis, she could also help. At that moment, two officials were checking the passengers' information and said that unfortunately, There were no extraordinary individuals on board. The attendant approached and informed them that she had found 2 extraordinary individuals who might be able to help. One of the officials was pleased and asked about their ranks. They both presented their identifications. The security guards were not very impressed with what they saw. Chi Ming, one of the train's security guards, said that an intern of stellar rank and a student about to enroll could not do much, especially since they did not know what was out there. The protagonist said that it was still better than staying there in the middle of nowhere. After all, they needed to reach a location with a signal to call for help. One of the guards agreed, but asked them to be careful when going out. Ming-hee asked Nianrong to stay. She asked why. He responded that she hadn't even started school yet, so she didn't need to take such risks. She angrily said that he was also a rookie, so what was the difference? Ming-hee agreed, and they both went outside the train. He asked her to stay close to him, as there was something strange about that fog. Ming-hee, Nianrong, and Chi Ming step out of the train to investigate what is happening. The protagonist warns the attendant to lock the door and not open it under any circumstances unless it is them. She immediately locks the train door. The 3 start walking through the dense fog. Chi Ming asks Ming-hee why he is doing all this and how old he is, considering he is directing trained professionals in their duties. Ming-hee replies that he is just being cautious and asks if it is common for a train to stop operating just because of fog. Chi Ming responds that it is not, as trains follow tracks unlike airplanes. The protagonist suggests that they likely detected something on the tracks that caused an automatic stop. Chi Ming, calm about the situation, assumes it is just a wild animal, mentioning that they occasionally appear. The 3 continue through the dense fog, hoping it is just a wild animal. Meanwhile, on the train, the fog remains dense. The flight attendant looks out the train window and hopes all 3 are safe. At that moment, she notices a woman outside the train. She quickly runs to the door, shouting about what a woman is doing outside in such a dangerous place. The attendant grabs the door handle and then remembers what Ming-hee told her, not to open the door under any circumstances unless it was one of the 3. She decides not to open the door, recalling his warning. A man nearby asks why she isn't letting the woman in. The attendant tries to see better through the window but cannot due to the dense fog. The man approaches and says that when someone knocks on the door, it is natural to open it. After all, the girl outside must be scared. The attendant responds that she will not open the door under the orders of an extraordinary. After all the doors were locked as soon as the train stopped, so there's no way someone could be outside. The overweight man argues that, regardless, it could be a local woman, asking how the attendant can be so cold as to leave someone outside. The attendant, already worried, insists they need to wait for the extraordinary individuals to return first. The man calls the attendant selfish and says he will open the door himself since there is someone crying outside. The woman tries to stop the man, pleading not to open the door. The man slaps the attendant, knocking her to the ground. He opens the door and says she deserved the slap for absurdly leaving someone crying outside. He smiles and invites the woman in, reaching out to her, urging her to hurry. Immediately after saying this, he panics upon realizing it is not a woman, but a monster. The man tries to retreat back into the train, but is captured by the monster's hair. He struggles to hold on to the door, but the monster's tentacles are stronger. He loses his grip on the door. The attendant, sitting on the floor, sees the monster outside and begins to tremble. Despite trembling, she starts to get up and runs deeper into the train. She remembers that there are many people inside the train, including children. Determined, she returns to try to close the door, even though she is terrified. She starts to close the door. At that moment, the tentacles grab her leg. She screams in fright as the tentacles begin pulling her outside while she tries to hold on to the door. She starts crying, realizing there is little she can do. One of the tentacles covers her mouth to prevent her from calling for help. With her last efforts, she manages to close the door completely just as the monster pulls her away from the train. The tentacles continue to cover her entire body as she can do nothing but cry. In that moment, she disappears into the dense fog. Inside the train, some people continue playing cards. They ask an attendant how much longer it will take. The attendant responds that she still doesn't know and asks them to wait patiently. She goes near the door and asks where Tan Xin went. She notices that the door isn't even locked and says Tan Xin was very careless about that. Outside, the monster's tentacles and a piece of the attendant's clothing are visible. One of the tentacles clings to the train. It sees that it's not possible to open the door further and then retreats a bit. The 3 continue their journey, trying to understand what happened. They approach a huge trail and imagine it to be a calamity. Mingy keeps observing the enormous trail and soon starts to think it was responsible for dislodging rocks onto the tracks. At that moment, his phone starts ringing. It's Galen. He is glad to have a signal there. He answers, and Galen is happy he finally picked up. Mingy says that something happened along the way. She informs him that his location is near the city of Nandu. The protagonist tells her that the train had to stop due to an emergency. He also mentions that there is a very thick fog, and no one has been able to contact the headquarters to ask for help. Galen asks if the train can still run. He says yes. The train itself has no issues, just some obstacles on the track that need to be removed, and then it can probably move again. However, his concern is with the thick fog. Galen informs him that once the obstacles are cleared, they need to leave the area urgently as quickly as possible, as they are still on the edge of the fog, so it shouldn't be problematic. Worried, Mingy asks what the fog is. Galen asks him not to ask too many questions and says that even with his current rank, it will be difficult to survive in the fog, so he must ensure everyone's safety quickly. Mingy starts descending the mountain, saying it won't be a problem. He then ends the call and finally joins Chi-Ming and Nianrong. The guard gets angry with Minghe for leaving and letting them do the heavy work. Minghe interrupts him and says they need to leave immediately as instructed by the command center. She asks how he knows this. The protagonist replies that he managed to get a bit of signal at the top of the mountain and that there is a trail of a calamity-level beast there. She asks if he is serious. Minghe says there is no reason to lie. The fog might be a high-level calamity, so they need to return to the train urgently to ensure everyone's safety. Nianrong becomes worried since her mother is still on the train. They start running at full speed, saying that upon reaching the train, they need to instruct it to start moving immediately. At that moment, Chi-Ming bumps into something and falls hard to the ground. He gets irritated and asks what the hell is in the way that made him fall so badly. The fog clears a bit, and he sees a corpse on the ground. Chi-Ming starts to panic upon seeing it. Minghe and Nianrong begin to look around. They start running when they notice something coming toward them. Minghe quickly grabs Nianrong's arm and throws her aside before she gets hit. The two see the monster close to them, trying to grab them with its tentacles. It was a completely terrifying beast using its hair to catch its prey. Chi-Ming grabs the corpse that made him fall and starts screaming that there is a monster there. Minghe extends his arm while running towards the guard. He protects him and asks him to find a place to hide. Nianrong starts gathering energy in her hand and says she will help the protagonist in the battle. The calamity prepares to attack, using its giant hair to strike the two. Minghe dodges the attack, but Nianrong cannot. She is thrown far by the impact. Minghe, worried, asks her to just hide. He shouts at her, saying he can handle the calamity. At that moment, a purple tentacle grabs the protagonist. Nianrong, on the ground, shouts that Minghe is just a stellar rank intern and not much stronger than her. Minghe asks the calamity what its purpose is in capturing his body. The calamity, smiling, pulls its arm hard, grabbing Minghe. He then leaps to take advantage of the momentum. He charges a powerful energy into his fist, saying that the pulling speed is perfect for him. Minghe delivers a mighty punch to the monster's face, sending it flying away. The calamity is thrown far, and the impact site forms numerous cracks. Nianrong shields herself from the wind caused by Minghe's punch, and remarks that the punch is too powerful for him to be just a stellar rank. The calamity places its hand on its belly, clearly feeling the blow. Its hair grows even more, forming sharp spears. The calamity is now angrier and starts laughing maniacally. It glares at Minghe and attacks with all its hair. He stares at the attack and then counters by delivering numerous blows to the sharp hair. Nianrong is surprised, unable to keep track of how many punches Minghe threw. Without wasting time, he leaps and comes face to face with the calamity. He quickly punches the monster's belly with a massive burst of power. His eyes were still glowing with so much power until he suddenly snaps back to normal, shocked by what he sees. He asks why there is a person inside the monster's body. Looking closer, he realizes it's the train attendant. Minghe quickly pulls the attendant's body out of the monster. The monster falls back as Minghe extracts her. The attendant, weak, wonders why she feels like she is drowning. The protagonist holds the attendant firmly and asks if she is still alive. Nianrong points out that the monster is fleeing, but Minghe tells her not to worry since the priority is saving the attendant's life. After all, she seems to be still breathing. Nianrong looks at the attendant's body, covered in green slime, and says it's disgusting. Minghe looks at the attendant and thinks there aren't many options. He quickly starts performing mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to save her. After that, he begins chest compressions. At this moment, the fog begins to dissipate, and the people inside the train start to see outside. Chi-Ming comes running. asking if anyone died and where the monster went. Just then, the attendant Tan Shin begins coughing up red slime. The other attendant inside the train sees this and quickly opens the door. She steps out and tells everyone to run back inside the train. Mingy carries Tan Shin and takes her inside. The attendant Tan Shin, weak, says she tried not to let the monster into the train. Chi Ming quickly starts closing the train door while everyone urges him to hurry. From a distance, the calamity can be seen devouring a corpse on the ground. Ming-hee shouts for them to start the train quickly to get out of there. At this moment, the train passes through part of the fog. Later, in Xiaoxi's location, someone is in the middle of that fog. It was Qing Yu talking to Commander Galen. She explains that a meteor presence was detected in Nandu City. At the time, no one identified anything, but apparently there was something. Galen continues explaining that the investigation didn't have much success besides identifying large amounts of vapor. However, since there are many industries there, a never-before-seen calamity might have arisen. Qing Yu says he understands the situation. Apparently the fog's movement varies, and monsters only appear when the fog becomes dense, disappearing mysteriously when the fog dissipates. He begins to walk through the fog while Gelen explains over the phone that people who entered the fog saw powerful calamities, probably emperor rank. She informs him that a few seconds ago, the fog was on the tracks, so he is heading in the right direction. Qing Yu kneels down and tells Gelen that she is correct. Definitely, a calamity passed there, and it was hungry since it ate all the livestock in the area. Galen informs him that thank God, the people in Xiaoxi were evacuated, and the people on the train are also safe. Qing Yu asks if there were any survivors in the industrial park. Gelen informs him that unfortunately, there were none. Qing Yu continues walking in the area, informing Galen that they need to quickly discover what is causing this, otherwise, the fog will return, killing everyone again. She agrees with that. She holds a report in her hand and says that the investigations are difficult, precisely because the calamities disappear along with the fog. So if it weren't for the incident, they probably wouldn't know anything yet. Qing Yu is curious and asks what incident that was. Gelen sends him a photo. She says it's a clue provided by the entomology team. It's basically a centipede spotted half a year ago. She further explains that through tracking the GPS chip implanted in the centipede, they discovered it hiding in a cave near Shishan. Qing Yu asks if it's really an insect because it's enormous. Gelen confirms that it is. However, the research team was unable to capture it again, and this cave is near the industrial park. Qing Yu asks if this means the centipede spotted is not a resident of the fog. Gelen responds affirmatively. It's the only living organism that left the fog. Qing Yu imagines that if they can capture it alive, they might better analyze the situation. Gelen says that's exactly the plan. Qing Yu continues walking through the area while the commander says they know everything about outside the fog, but nothing about the inside. He grips his sword and says he will definitely bring the centipede back. He is startled to see something ahead, just as Gelen informs him that the centipede might have undergone slight changes in the fog. He finds the centipede devouring a pig, but it's enormous. Gelen asks over the phone if something happened because she heard a noise. Qing Yu observes the centipede and asks Gelen how she dares to call it small. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Minghe and the others are in an ambulance approaching the city. Qi Ming praises the protagonist, saying he didn't expect a stellar rank to be so powerful, and thanks to him, they defeated the monster. Ming-hee says he only scared the monster away, unfortunately. He looks at the attendant Tan Shin and says she was the true hero. If it weren't for her closing the door, the outcome would have been disastrous. The security guards agree, saying she was definitely a great hero. Ming-hee looks at the hospital outside and remarks that he seems to have a strong connection to such places, since he's always in one. At that moment, his phone rings, and he sees it's an unknown number. He answers, and the person asks if it's Ming-hee. He says yes and asks who it is. The person asks if he really doesn't recognize the voice. Embarrassed, he asks if it's Lu Qian. She happily replies that it is. People observe her beauty as she talks to the protagonist. Extremely happy, Ming-hee asks how she got his number. She mentions that Lin gave it to her and said he would be in Nandu. She asks why she couldn't find him earlier. People passing by Lu Xian become so distracted they bump into walls. Ming-hee explains that something happened along the way. Lu Xian asks if he entered the fog. Surprised that she knows about the fog, he says yes, they had to circumvent it. She smiles and asks where he is now so they can meet. People passing by are so captivated by her beauty that they accidentally walk into walls. The protagonist asks if she is serious. He says he's only going to the Extraordinary Institute and suggests they meet outside the school. She agrees. He then takes a taxi and starts thinking about Lu Qian. He remembers them studying together. walking through the forest. He even recalls the day he asked her out on a date, but she said it was sudden and asked for a few days to think about it. Minghee said it was no problem. Minghee recalls all this and realizes it's been a year since she hasn't responded, so it's probably a no. Luqian is under a tree talking to a friend. The friend asks if it's that friend who fell into a coma. Luqian replies yes, and that he's in the city. They continue talking, and Luqian says that Minghee probably saw the letter she left for him, agreeing to go out with him if he woke up from the coma. Her friend comments that Luqian probably left the letter out of pity and should tell the truth. The friend gets serious and says Luqian has countless admirers in the city, and Minghee is just a high school graduate. So how can he compare to the elites of Nandu? Luqian sits down and says that it's not quite like that since she really liked him at the time. Her friend tells Luqian that it was a year ago when she was still naive, and nowadays she is much smarter and prettier. Luqian says she understands but still thinks Minghee is a really nice person, and since he's already here, she should go out with him. If they are not compatible, then she will tell him to his face. Her friend, not accepting this, asks if she knows how many hearts she will break if she goes out with Minghee, who didn't even get into the meta-human school. Luqian asks her friend not to talk like that, and she already agreed to go out with him. If they don't get along, they will go their separate ways. Her friend then says it's okay, but asks her not to let him take advantage of her. Luqian says she is aware of that. Luqian gets up and says that Minghee is probably arriving, so she's going, and she also tells her friend that he is a good person and she should meet him. Her friend says she's only interested in strong and handsome guys. The protagonist finally arrives at the extraordinary Nandu Institute. He is surprised, as it is cooler than he thought. He ponders, imagining that this year he needs to get enrolled there. Some girls gossip about the protagonist's clothes, which are dirty, and probably think he is a country bumpkin. These same girls notice Luqian passing by and find her stunning, saying that even other girls fall for her. Luqian walks with all her beauty, and the girls around gossip that she even rejected Mr. He, who gave her a sea of roses when he confessed, and this he, besides being handsome, is the son of one of the owners of the 3 biggest corporations at that school. Luqian then spots Minghee and calls out his name. The protagonist approaches and says it's been a while since they last saw each other, and she looks different. Luqian replies that she thinks the same about him. She then invites him to have coffee nearby. Minghee agrees. The two then leave while the girls gossip about whether she is really going on a date with a guy like that. Another girl comments that they are probably just friends. The protagonist ponders whether he should talk about the letter from a year ago, but it's been a long time. Minghee thinks at that moment that she is offering coffee so as not to make him sad since she will put him in the friend zone. Meanwhile, she thinks that if it's a date, they should be holding hands. But that should come from him. Luqian feels very embarrassed, wondering if he will kiss her there, especially since there are many people around. Minghee, also embarrassed, imagines that if they can't be a couple, being just friends would be great too. They then arrive at the cafe. Minghee pulls out the chair for Luqian to sit and says that apparently everyone there knows her, and he also heard Lin say that she is quite famous at that institute. She replies that people only remember her because she has been praised a few times and asks if he is there to see the school. The protagonist replies yes, and although he didn't make it last time, he wants to take the special exam this time. She finds that interesting. Minghee comments that he wanted to visit the biggest city in the south. At this moment, Luqian, besides being embarrassed, is thoughtful, imagining that her house is big, but living together on the first day doesn't seem right. She feels all confused since it's the first time she goes on a date. Minghee starts saying that he will look for a place to rent and notices Luqian's face is red and asks if she is sick. She replies that it's nothing and says she can ask around about places to rent and that if he is accepted, they will be classmates again. She, with a trembling voice, also says that it will be easier for them to be together too. The protagonist is confused if he heard her right saying they will be together. Maybe it's because in the past they used to go to the library a lot. He imagines she might already have a boyfriend since she is very pretty and intelligent. Luqian takes the opportunity to ask if he found anything when the mist appeared. The protagonist replies, yes, a female monster with tentacles appeared near the train. He also says that the monster was very good at disguising itself from a distance, as it looked like a woman. She, surprised, asks if it was very dangerous and how he managed to escape. Minghee replies that now he is extraordinary, and he even has his insignia. A blond man watches them from a distance. She looks at Minghee's insignia as he explains that he has been training as a hunter since waking up from the coma. He also says that they both promised to enroll together, and although he failed, he won't have any regrets this time. She is happy that the protagonist remembers the promise they made last time. At that moment, the blonde man approaches, calling Minghee by name. He taps the insignia, calling the protagonist an old friend. His name is Kai, and he grabs Minghee's insignia, asking if he knows what the lowest rank at that school is after a year. He asks and then answers that it's the lunar rank. Kai says that Minghee is just a stellar rank and still an intern, so he asks him to stop showing that off as it's embarrassing even for him as an old friend. Kai turns to Luqian and asks why she didn't mention Minghee being there. He smiles and says that if he had known, he would have organized a reunion of all their old classmates. She doesn't like that and says she just wanted a private conversation with Minghee. The protagonist jokes and waves his hand, telling Kai that he and Luqian have a lot to talk about, so he's unnecessary there. Kai gets furious at the mocking tone Minghee used. At that moment, Luqian asks for silence as she's receiving a call. Kai realizes he's being ignored and gets stressed. He slams the insignia on the table and leaves the place. Kai leaves extremely furious, saying how dare Minghee follow her to the Wudu Academy. He also says that Luqian is a big star, and he could never deserve her since Kai himself is the perfect man for her. Luqian, still on the call, asks to be picked up as she's at the cafe. She stands up and apologizes, saying an emergency came up, and she needs to leave. The protagonist says it's no problem, as they can talk another time. She then leaves, saying she'll be rooting for him to pass the exam. He thanks her for her kindness. Outside, she meets her brother and asks what happened. Her brother replies that the Central needs her power to control electricity, and they need to leave urgently. Luqian says that's fine. Minghee watches the two from the window, wondering if that guy is her boyfriend. He imagines he can't bother her from that day onward. At the admissions office, two people are talking, wondering why there's an admission exam since enrollment ended a long time ago. Minghee arrives as the two people comment that it's a special admission exam, essentially a backdoor for those who couldn't pass before to pass now. The protagonist observes the size of the place. At that moment, someone looks at Minghee and asks if he's also there for the exam. The protagonist replies yes, so the person asks them to enter together. The man introduces himself as Ling Hui and says the protagonist looks fancy. Minghee is confused. The man says that his clothes are worth about 300 yuan. Minghee responds that they are not. They look at the crowd, and Ling Hui asks how much Minghee's parents gave to the school. The protagonist is confused by what he means. Ling Hui tells the protagonist not to pretend, as everyone knows the special exam is a glorified backdoor. Ling Hui smiles and says his parents paid 7 million for his admission qualification. Minghee is surprised and asks if that's really possible. Ling Hui is surprised, realizing the protagonist really doesn't know, and says Minghee must be determined, since it's almost impossible to pass without a bribe. Minghee says he just heard about it and decided to check it out. Ling Hui says that's very naive, as the institute doesn't need more people since it has many talented individuals. Minghee then says it seems the special admission is a facade for those who want to buy a scholarship. Ling Hui realizes that Minghee is intelligent since he understood quickly. Ling Hui also says that he made a good deal, as he only spent 7 million to get in there. Minghee becomes worried, thinking this means he won't pass. Ling Hui advises the protagonist to see how things go that year and suggests he gathers 7 million next year to bribe his way in smoothly. At that moment, a man shouts to everyone, introducing himself as Yan Jin, the professor in charge of their admission. He announces that roll call will begin. He starts by calling Xie, who responds that he is present. The professor then calls Dong Shu, who also responds that he is present. The professor continues calling out names until he finally reaches Ling Hui, who confirms his presence. At this moment, the professor says the roll call is finished for the year. Ling Hui calls the professor's attention, pointing out that there is another person named Minghee, whom the professor might have missed. Yan Jin realizes there is indeed another sheet he hadn't noticed. Upon flipping it, he sees the protagonist's name and notes that this person has mystical fists. The professor carefully examines this, and then calls Minghee, who also confirms his presence. One of the instructors announces that the exam consists of 5 parts, starting with the physical and combat ability test. He explains that the force dummy is there, and they will set a minimum individual value for each student based on their superpower. The professor then calls Minghee, saying that his power is explosive mystical fists, so he needs to achieve at least 1,500 kilograms, or he can leave. Ling Hui tells the protagonist that the institute is already trying to make him give up. The protagonist approaches the dummy and thinks this test is the same as the one he did at the Hunters Association. He takes a deep breath and recalls scoring 1,000 kilograms last time. He then gathers a lot of energy in his fist and punches the dummy with all his might. The punch hits the dummy squarely, sending it flying and causing a huge explosion from the impact. All the students in the hall are horrified by that overwhelming power. The test instructors are also left speechless by the sheer force. They see the dummy registering 2,200 kilograms, which is above the dummy's limit. Essentially, the protagonist exceeded what the dummy could withstand. Yeonjin, sweating coldly, declares that Minghee passed the test as he exceeded the maximum limit. He then announces that everyone has passed, as the dummy broke, meaning everyone present is considered to have passed the test. The protagonist can't believe it and asks if the professor is really allowed to do that. The students just smile and say that this is the instant pass ability, a power that comes with money. A woman with glasses approaches the professor and says that based on Minghee's performance, it would not be wise to consider accepting him. Yeonjin says that every year they reject many complete students, so she is suggesting accepting all of them. The man next to her agrees, saying that if they lack intelligence, they will just die in the first battle they encounter. The woman with glasses remarks that if the officials didn't recommend the people, then they wouldn't even be qualified to register. She says this while looking at the sheet with the students' information, which shows that Minghee had a special recommendation from government officials. The professor comments that they should just increase the difficulty in the next rounds to eliminate him. Yeonjin announces that the second test is a speed test, which will take place in an open field with enough space for them to run. He also informs them that anyone trampled by the Crimson General rank cheetah will be disqualified. The man in charge of the cheetah asks if those are the examinees for that year. The professor informs the two instructors that they will start the counter from outside. Yeonjin approaches the man and orders his demonic beast to start by going after Minghee to disqualify him. The man asks what to do after that. The professor instructs him to go easy afterward, or else everyone there will be disqualified. The man then heads to the arena with the cheetah, while the professor announces that the test has begun. Ling Hui runs at full speed away from there. The cheetah starts chasing him. At that moment, one of the instructors gives that student a score of 700. The man looks at the board in disbelief that the boy donated so much to pass. The cheetah's owner informs that it cannot attack that boy. The cheetah leaps with all its might, and as it gets close to the student, it hears the whistle indicating it cannot attack that student. The monster pretends to miss the attack, as if the student were too fast. The cheetah falls to the ground without hitting Ling Hui. The protagonist observes from afar and says that although it is a general rank cheetah, it seems quite weak. Minghee starts running again, thinking that he should pass easily like this. The cheetah remains sad because it cannot use all its power. At that moment, its owner whistles again. The cheetah understands the instruction that it can attack the student Minghee with full power. The cheetah gets excited and prepares for the hunt. Minghee feels strange, as his back suddenly gets cold. He notices that the cheetah is already catching up to him. The protagonist dodges at the last moment. The cheetah brakes hard since it was at high speed. It then turns around and looks terrifyingly at Minghee. The protagonist finds it strange, as the monster completely changed its appearance at that moment. The terrifying cheetah starts running at Minghee again. The protagonist keeps fleeing, wondering how that cat's speed could be so insane. Minghee thinks he should run towards the other students to make the cheetah change targets. He passes by a guy and can't believe that person is taking a selfie. The cheetah ignores the other students and keeps pursuing the protagonist. Minghee starts getting stressed, as there are several students there, but the cheetah insists on chasing him. The protagonist decides to stop messing around and shows his full speed. He starts running at full speed, saying that he didn't do physical training for nothing. A huge explosion is caused by the impulse he took, leaving the cheetah confused. Minghee runs at full speed around the field, giving the cheetah no chance to catch him. The other students wonder what the hell is happening, and if Minghee is really human since such speed is impossible to achieve. The woman with glasses is surprised and says that speed surpasses several lunar ranks. The professor, indignant, says that having speed without endurance is useless. Then, 10 minutes pass, and the cheetah is almost collapsing from exhaustion, unable to catch Minghee at all. The protagonist mocks the beast, asking if it's already tired, and decides to make things more interesting. Minghee, with a sinister look, says that he's been hunted until now, but now it's his turn to be the hunter. He says he will catch that cheetah and break all its teeth. The cheetah panics and starts running away at full speed from Minghee, who pursues it. The professor stands with his mouth open, unable to believe what he's seeing. Then the 15 minutes of the test pass, and Minghee says he hasn't even started having fun yet. The cheetah's owner begs to spare his poor beast, which can't stand anymore. The professor announces that the beast didn't trample anyone, so everyone passed the test. Minghee, tired, had expected this to happen. Yeonjin announces that the third test is a reaction time test. The woman with glasses asks to reconsider the candidate, saying that Ming-hye is better than most students. She says she understands that special admissions are based on bribes, but they cannot lose an extraordinary individual who has much to contribute to society. The professor says that he has already warned that just being good is not enough. Another man agrees, saying that in special admissions they need to be extremely strict. He says this but wonders why the professors hate Ming-hye so much. The professor thinks that maybe there are no more spots for donations, but why is there no place for society? Someone is bribing the professor, saying that his son is good, and that besides that money, he will also donate 6 million to the school. All the professor has to do is expel Ming-hye, so he feels he needs to be strict in admissions. The woman with glasses says that in this reaction test, they will use that cursed tree. It's called the demonic tree. She explains that they have already cut the demonic tree, so there is no risk to life, although there is a risk of getting hurt. The instructor approaches the tree and says that just giving it fresh blood will make it hysterically attack everyone around. He says this, and then makes a small cut on his finger to draw blood. He uses this blood to activate the tree. The demonic tree then comes to life for a moment, making its eyes light up again. The instructor announces that the name she calls should step into the yellow zone, and after the test, move to the blue zone right behind her. The first name called is Zizi. He stands before the demonic tree. The tree lashes out at Zizi, but he laughs, saying the tree is too slow. 5 minutes pass, and the instructor says he passed. Zizi thinks he is incredible with his instant pass ability. The instructor makes a small cut on his finger again to activate the tree. Another person also passes. This continues with all the students, each time the instructor giving a bit of blood and the student passing. Ming-hye puts his hand on his head, thinking that they are too obvious, letting everyone pass so easily. At this moment, the instructor calls for Ming-hye. The professor changes his look. The instructor understands the signal. This time, instead of making a small cut on his finger, he makes a large cut on his hand. He takes that lot of blood to the tree, thinking that the more blood the tree receives, the more powerful it becomes, so it will probably go out of control with so much power. The tree becomes much more alive when it's Ming-hye's turn. It grabs its vine and attacks with full force toward Ming-hye. The protagonist sees that powerful attack and is not even surprised, as he imagined it would happen. The tree prepares to strike another attack, but Ming-hye jumps, dodging easily. He continues dodging, thinking it's a joke, since not even bullets can hit him. The tree continues frantically attacking, and the protagonist dodges all of them, while mocking, saying that his passive luck ability is no joke. The instructor panics, as it seems the tree still can't hit him. The professor asks why the tree is attacking so slowly, and asks the instructor if he held back when giving blood to it. The instructor gets worried, as he didn't hold back, and says he will increase the difficulty. He raises his hand and prepares the knife to draw more blood. This time, he makes 2 large cuts on his hand, making a lot more blood flow. He then touches the tree, making it overflow with enormous energy. The eyes of the demonic tree glow even brighter, and it becomes completely furious with so much power overflowing through it after receiving so much blood. Its branches start to grow exponentially. The tree is extremely more powerful than before. It starts using its branches to attack Ming-hye. The protagonist closes his eyes and thinks that this is the perfect situation for him to practice his hearing. He then starts dodging all the tree's attacks, doing so with his eyes closed, only dodging using his hearing. All the students and professors are in shock, seeing Ming-hye dodge like that. One of the students panics, asking why the tree's attacks only fall near Ming-hye but none hit him. The professor, furious, asks if he wants to try it himself. The student is startled and says he was just joking. Ming-hye then uses his secret art while dodging. He activates his fast evasion and continues dodging all the attacks with extreme ease. 5 minutes pass, and Ming-hye hasn't been hit once. The people around ask if the protagonist is really human since his reaction time is terrifying. By then, the demonic tree is already drooping, too exhausted to make another attack. Ming-hye stretches, thinking that the tree is quite effective for dodge training. Meanwhile, the instructor has fainted from giving too much blood to the tree. Because of this, the professor announces that the round is over, and Ming-hye has passed as well. The instructor with glasses says that Ming-hye's reaction time surpasses most of the institute students, so they need to reconsider him. The professor, furious, says that many students do well, but that doesn't mean they will perform well in a real fight. Therefore, they need to assess all aspects. With that said, they can't go easy, so a real battle would be the best test. The professor announces that they will move on to the next round. A student carries the instructor out of there. In the infirmary, someone gives a blood bag to the instructor and tells Professor Schur not to feel that way. as time heals everything, and the fact that his girlfriend cheated on him with his uncle doesn't mean much. But Professor Schur says he isn't upset about that. He became anemic after giving too much blood to the demonic tree, which is why he is feeling unwell and crying like that. The person there is the professor's brother. He places a green plant on Professor Schur's head and tells him that everything will pass, and he should get better since his girlfriend didn't deserve him, so he should stop crying. The professor continues crying despite that not being the reason. The students and professors begin walking toward the final test. They go to a crystal ball, and the professor announces that the last test is simple. They will just see the talent of each person's power. The professor also says that according to the information, Minghe's talent is white dust. The protagonist approaches and asks why they didn't do this test first. After all, if he didn't pass, they wouldn't have had to do the other 3 tests for nothing. The professor says that rules are rules. Minghe says he understands. He had forgotten how much the professor loves rules. Yanjin gets furious and asks what Minghe meant by that. The protagonist replies that it's nothing, and asks if he will go first again. The professor yells that Minghe will go last. The professor turns and says that it doesn't really matter who goes first, and asks Assistant J to record the results. Ling Hui then says he will go first and starts walking towards the crystal ball. He places his hand on it, and something purple starts to appear. He is pleased to see a purple glow coming from the crystal. The professor announces that Ling Hui has a purple soul grade. Minghe gives a thumbs up and congratulates Ling Hui, saying he didn't expect him to have a purple soul talent. Ling Hui is embarrassed to hear that. The next student takes the test and also gets a purple grade, as does the next one, and the next. Minghe is surprised, wondering how all of them got purple souls. Yanjin smiles and tells Minghe that he looked at his information from when he took the tests at Nandu Institute. He mentions that back then, Minghe also passed all the tests, but in the final evaluation he got white dust and had a hidden power that was worthless in combat. Minghe turns and asks what he means by that. The professor raises his finger and comments that everything the protagonist learned is at the high school level, but there's one important thing he didn't learn. He explains that in college, the first thing a person learns is that power ranks are mutable. He explains that there is a material called life drop that can be obtained from a special calamity beast. Yanjinma mentions that an extraordinary person can use this life drop to replace their original power with a new one. Basically, the initial ranks can be changed as long as there is enough money, making the powers even greater. The professor asks if Minghe now understands why all those people have the purple soul talent power. Minghe can't believe that powers are really mutable. The professor adjusts his tie and admits that Minghe is truly incredible, being much stronger than all of them in every test, but wonders how he thinks he will surpass everyone in that last test. Yanjin gets serious and says there is a minimum requirement to be recruited, and that minimum is to be at least of the purple soul rank. The professor praises the protagonist's fists, saying they are really powerful. He also praises his speed, saying it is unmatched, and his reflexes, which are perfect. He asks if Minghe knows how much destructive power a supreme soul art gives an extraordinary individual. He asks if Minghe thinks he can get a supreme soul art that only high-ranking extraordinaries possess. Minghe changes his expression and says he does know. The protagonist responds that a supreme soul art can create a destructive power that far exceeds the body's limits. He says this, recalling his supreme art that creates several fist-shaped spirits. He also says that a supreme art can go far beyond someone more powerful than he is. The professor says it's good that he has this knowledge, but it will be useless against any examinee there who possesses a supreme soul. The protagonist starts walking towards the crystal while thanking him for the warning. He begins climbing the stairs, saying that if a person's basics are strong enough, then their supreme soul art will be even more powerful. He says this as he approaches the crystal ball. He looks at it, remembering when he was humiliated for getting white dust. He places his hand on the crystal and starts gathering energy. A white light begins to form in the crystal. The professor asks if Minghe plans to make himself a joke again. The color gradually changes, becoming more blue. The assistant is surprised, as it seems his talent has evolved since last time. Professor Schur approaches and says it looks like it's just blue spirit rank. The assistant says she thought he was still in the infirmary. At that moment, the color starts changing again in the crystal. This time the purple glow becomes extremely strong. People can't believe it's the purple soul. The professors are in disbelief, saying it's impossible, and ask if the information didn't say Minghe was white dust. Ling Hui approaches the professor and mocks him, saying that he himself said powers are mutable, so Minghe was white dust but has evolved since then. Ling Hui gives a thumbs up and praises Minghe, saying he's incredible. At this moment, the protagonist notices something in the crystal. The power's color is changing to red, indicating that the rank is red honor. He immediately decides to remove his hand to avoid changing the crystal's color. He then leaves the test zone, while the goddess in his head says it was a good idea to hide his true power, since there's no need to show mere humans that he is of red honor rank. Minghee goes to the professor and asks if he has passed with that. The professor replies yes. Minghee, with a mocking tone, thanks the professor for his kindness and says that since everyone there got a purple soul, his score should be the highest. The professor gets angry hearing that, while the assistant responds that yes, he is extraordinary. Yeonjim yells at him not to be arrogant and says there is still one last test, which is live combat. The assistant continues talking to Minghee and asks why he doesn't take the entrance exam that year. He would definitely pass. Professor Shi tells everyone to rest, since after this, there will be the live combat test. The professors then return to the meeting room. Yeonjim is furious, asking how Minghee dares to cause trouble like that. Professor Shi says that everything indicates he is an elite student. At that moment, someone knocks on the door, and the professors ask the person to come in. It's Kai, who heard they are conducting the admission exam and need volunteers for the live combat, so he offers to help. The assistant says she remembers him, and if she's not mistaken, Kai ranked third among the students from Lanyang City. She says he is very strong, and it wouldn't be fair to put him against the students. Professor Shi says that it's a special exam, so they need to be strict. They look at Kai and say that he is already ranked among the top 10 in live combat at Nandu Institute. Yeonjin then smiles and says it's decided. Kai will participate in the live combat against the students. All the participants go to the combat arena. Ling Hui comments that apparently several students have shown up to watch the combat exam. Minghee wonders if Lu Qian might be there too, but he doubts it, as she has a boyfriend. The assistant announces that the combat section is open to everyone, so students can also watch. The professor takes a deep breath and says it's good to be open and fair, so at least no one can accuse him of abusing his authority. Professor Shi announces that he will read out the pairs for the fights. He announces it will be Minghee versus Kai, Ling Hui versus Xinghe, and finally, Dongshu versus Binlong. Two girls in the audience ask if it's really the Kai who is among the top 10 in combat. The other girl confirms and says he's amazing. Kai starts to enter the arena while the audience begins to cheer for him, calling him both handsome and incredible. He simply waves to everyone with a big smile. He walks towards Minghee and says they've finally met again. The protagonist only replies that it's quite a coincidence. The two face each other, and Kai says that although they are high school classmates, he will show no mercy. The protagonist responds that he expected as much. Kai just thinks that he can finally beat up Minghee. The instructor then yells for them to start the fight. Immediately, Kai begins to gather energy in his hand. The energy overflows more and more until he tells the protagonist that he might not know it, but Kai can control the wind. Minghee wastes no time and leaps towards Kai. Immediately, Kai unleashes his wind ram force attack towards the protagonist. Minghee, who is already running, sees the massive vortex coming his way. The protagonist simply throws his arm forward and punches the vortex. The punch causes a huge explosion, dissipating the enormous vortex. Kai is thrown back by the impact of the blows. He looks serious, as he did not expect Minghee to counterattack that way. The protagonist has his fist clenched, saying that he has just warmed up and will now fight seriously. He also says that, honestly, he always hated Kai in high school, calling him two-faced. Kai gets angry, asking who is two-faced there. He retorts, saying that the protagonist is trash, who failed the entrance exam of the institute. Minghee says that every time he's near Lu Qian, Kai shows up to cause trouble, and still laughs behind his back. Minghee also comments that he heard from two other people that Kai always teamed up with other students to exclude the protagonist. Kai bursts into laughter, calling Minghee a joke. He also says that the protagonist is an unemployed beggar, that his training probably consists of carrying bricks, and yet he had the nerve to set foot in the institute. Minghee just asks why he showed up at the combat arena. Kai replies that it was at the institute's request. The protagonist laughs, asking if it's serious, and calls Kai a teacher's assistant. The assistant, hearing the conversation, announces that Kai volunteered himself and even asked to fight exclusively against Minghee. Kai becomes extremely furious that the assistant revealed this, as it was supposed to be a secret. Kai, enraged, says he doesn't care if he volunteered himself. This is a special exam, so if he judges Minghee as unworthy, then he is unworthy. Not to mention how close the protagonist is to Lu Qian, so he doesn't deserve to be at the academy. Minghee recounts that every time he meets with Lu Qian, Kai shows up to ruin the atmosphere, and the same thing happened a few days ago. He still taunts, saying that if Kai likes Luxian, he should just confess to her instead of being jealous. Minghe starts taking off his jacket and says that everyone's success depends on themselves, so what's the point of hating him? He comments that Kai probably confessed to her and was brutally rejected and started bullying the protagonist to fix his ego. Kai becomes extremely furious and asks what's wrong if that is the reason. He still says that just looking at Minghe makes him mad. Kai says it's an insult for Minghe to show up and dare to enter a sacred place like that institute when he's so weak. Kai continues to insult Minghe in every possible way. Minghe just smiles and says that the real Kai has appeared because compared to the old two-faced Kai, this true Kai, who constantly insults him, actually makes Minghe feel better. Minghe finishes taking off his jacket and says that his desire to beat up Kai hasn't diminished at all. Kai says that it seems the protagonist doesn't understand. It's time to beg him to let him pass the exam since he is the protagonist's examiner. Minghe throws his jacket far away and says that he's wanted to beat up Kai for a long time, but he was poor before and didn't want to have to pay for those medical expenses. Ling Hui grabs the protagonist's jacket and asks if it's finally going to start. The protagonist begins cracking his body and says that since it's a combat exam, he won't have to cover hospital bills, and it even gives him a reason to claim self-defense for beating up Kai. Kai smiles and says it's all a joke. He asks the protagonist if he knows that Kai is among the top 10 in his grade. There's nothing Minghe can do about it. Before he can finish saying this, Minghe is already running at full speed towards Kai, ready to punch him in the face. Kai defends himself using all his strength since the blow was powerful. However, it wasn't enough, and the impact of the punch sent Kai flying. Minghe jumps again to run, saying that now it's the second stage, explosive speed. Minghe instantly gets close to Kai, the jump so strong it left a hole in the ground from the force. The protagonist immediately lands a left uppercut on Kai's chin, making him spit blood instantly. Kai goes flying into the sky from the punch, which was so strong it knocked a tooth out of his mouth. At this moment, a windstorm begins to form. It was Kai gathering energy in his legs with his wind abilities. Kai's expression becomes terrifying as he is extremely angry from the punch he took. He keeps staring intensely at the protagonist, unable to hide his hatred. At this moment, Kai activates his spiritual art, making several tornadoes swirl around his arms and legs. Kai shouts, activating his whip wind force ability. This ability sends the tornado in his hand towards Minghe, but the protagonist dodges it with little difficulty. At this moment, several tornadoes head towards the protagonist, trying to corner him. The tornadoes cause massive destruction on the ground, while Kai remains airborne due to his ability. Kai starts laughing, asking what Minghe can do if he can't even get close. He taunts the protagonist, saying those fists are useless if they can't reach. Kai immediately aims downward and uses his intermediate spiritual art. He fires his wind spirit towards the protagonist. The vortex of this spirit is much larger than the previous tornadoes. The protagonist looks at the massive windstorm and realizes that Kai used a spiritual art. He places his hand on the ground and begins to absorb power. He activates his mystic earth fist. After doing this, he starts gathering immense power in his fist while that wind spirit approaches. The wind spirit, which looks more like a huge open-mouthed snake, gets closer and closer, ready to swallow Minghe. Kai is extremely confident, thinking the fight will end right there. However, he notices something strange, as if the earth were rising and his spirit had vanished. At that moment, the sandpillar fist attack hits Kai directly, sending him flying even further. That massive sand fist throws Kai to the other side of the arena. People in the audience watch from afar and wonder if Kai is really among the top 10 strongest, because if that's the case, it doesn't make sense for him to be getting beaten up by someone who's not even enrolled. A girl in the audience is extremely surprised, saying that Minghe is really strong and that she expected nothing less from the guy dating Luxian. Kai, with his clothes torn, starts to get up, overflowing with immense power. He tells Minghe that he forgot to mention one thing. He informs him that his extraordinary ability comes with a passive skill. Kai starts to shout loudly, saying that the stronger he gets, the more powerful the wind he commands becomes. Kai gathers an impressive amount of power in his fists and compliments Minghe, saying that he managed to push Kai to his most powerful state. Extremely furious, Kai activates his soul art ability. He then unleashes his wild tornado attack, which is dozens of times larger and more devastating than his previous tornadoes. The students in the audience can't believe it, as only people of the purple soul rank can use a soul art, and it's terrifying to see even from a distance. The assistant screams desperately to the professor, saying that Kai is going too far using a supreme art, which is definitely forbidden. Professor Yanjim just watches without saying anything. Kai flies again, asking Minghe what brute strength can do about it. He asks the protagonist to feel the despair of that power. The power was so great that it was disintegrating the sand fist in the middle of the arena. The protagonist looks up surprised, thinking that it's a pity because compared to his own soul art, that one is extremely weak. Professor Schur comments that even among the grades within the Purple Soul rank, Kai's wind power is very strong. It's like a stone attacking an egg. The assistant insists that if this continues, Minghe will be in serious trouble. Yeonjim remains silent, watching, as he wants Minghe to lose anyway. Linghui panics and asks Minghe to run from that power. The hurricane hits the protagonist directly. The audience goes into despair as Minghe is swallowed by the giant tornado. The assistant keeps screaming at Professor Yeonjim, but he remains silent. Minghe continues gathering energy in his body and says that if someone wants to defeat another, they should unleash their soul art without holding back. The protagonist's eyes start to glow as he says that just talking will make someone irritated because of the lack of power. Kai shouts angrily, asking who there is lacking power. He says that at first, he wanted to leave Minghe with a bit of dignity after getting beaten, but now he'll have several days paralyzed in the hospital. The audience can barely watch, as the windstorm is very strong. Kai makes the tornado even more powerful, even though Minghe is already inside it. The professors watch without intervening at any point. The protagonist continues gathering more and more purple energy in his fist while looking at the top of the tornado. The energy keeps accumulating in his fist. The power will become even denser, reaching its final phase. Minghe, now at his maximum power, prepares to strike his blow against Kai's most powerful attack. The protagonist then unleashes his hurricane fist, hitting Kai directly at the top of that tornado, giving him no chance to defend as the power was overwhelming. Kai can only watch that power coming towards him and starts to sweat coldly. His eye starts to tremble as he knows the chance of dodging that is zero. Then Kai's giant blue tornado becomes a giant purple tornado, coming from the protagonist's attack, devastating everything around. Now only dust remains settling inside the arena. Minghe stands with his fist clenched, looking seriously forward. Kai is completely finished after being thrown with full force towards the wall. The protagonist dissipates some of his power, realizing it will no longer be necessary to use it again. Everyone in the audience is completely shocked by this fight. The two professors are left speechless after witnessing such power coming from Minghe. Kai, on his knees on the ground with his whole body injured and blood coming from everywhere, then collapses face first on the ground, completely drained of strength. Trembling all over, Kai asks what that was. Minghe replies that it was his mystic fist. It has the ability to convert a conductor into power, and the converter became Kai's wind force. Kai places his hand on the ground, trying to get up, and asks how that can be called a spiritual art. He, completely defeated, asks how the hell Minghe's spiritual art surpassed his own. Minghe, serious, tells Kai that if he had used a soul art, he would have been reduced to dust at that very moment. So, as they are old classmates, the protagonist wanted to at least leave Kai's face intact. Kai shouts from a distance, not believing that Minghe can also use a soul art. Ling Hui arrives in the arena and throws the jacket back to Minghe. Ling Hui calls Kai an idiot and says that the protagonist, besides passing the power test, also has a purple soul, and defeated him without even using a soul art. Kai, trembling since he is out of strength, asks how it is possible that Minghe has a purple soul after all. In the last ceremony, he was clearly a white dust. The protagonist starts to put on his jacket and says that people can get stronger, and advises Kai to enjoy his stay in the hospital since he got pretty injured. Ling Hui hugs Minghe and says that apparently the top 10 there are quite weak, and that he will get along well with Minghe at the Institute. The protagonist responds that there are many geniuses at the Institute, so it is impossible that all the others are as weak as Kai. Kai can't believe he is being humiliated like this, and starts spitting blood. Minghe approaches the professors and says that now he must be the proud student of the Institute. The assistant whispers to the professor that after everyone witnessed the protagonist's abilities, not enrolling him could result in criticism. Yeonjim gets serious and tells the protagonist not to be hasty, as the Nandu Extraordinary Institute has never lacked geniuses with exceptional powers. Minghe taunts the professor, saying that it is the professor's duty to be strict with admissions. After all, if people saw Kai, they would say that all the top 10 are accepted through the back door, damaging the Institute's reputation. Minghe says that if they need a good critic, they can feel free to ask the protagonist. The professor grinds his teeth, extremely furious with Minghe's words. Still furious, he congratulates the protagonist on becoming a student of the Institute. He asks Mingi to be less arrogant and more modest and open-minded, and to respect his instructors. The protagonist raises his arms and says it will depend on who the instructor is. The professor gets irritated and tells him not to push his limits. The assistant asks if they will reimburse the student for the hospital fees. Yeonjin replies that using soul art in combat between students is forbidden, and Kai knew that. If he asked for trouble, then why should they reimburse him? Kai, on the stretcher, hears this and tries to shout that they don't need to worry, because money is not a problem for him. Ling Hui taunts, saying that he has seen stubborn people, but never someone stubborn even about medical expenses. Kai hears this and spits blood again, knowing it's a jab at him. After all this, all the other matches also finished one after another in the combat arena. Ling Hui says goodbye to the protagonist, saying he needs to leave to celebrate his admission, but they will see each other soon. Minghee responds that it's okay. At that moment, a girl approaches the protagonist, calling him a newbie, since he is new at the institute. She, shyly, says that Minghee just joined the institute, so he is not used to the place, and she can help. She asks the protagonist to add her on WeChat, so she can be his guide. He thanks her for her kindness, and asks where the wrong courtyard is. The girl asks if he wants to accompany her, and says that she is also going there, so she can keep him company. At that moment, Lucian is approaching, and can't believe the audacity of that girl. She calls out to the girl, saying that besides being a senior, she is Minghee's high school classmate, so she will be his guide, and thanks the girl for her enthusiasm. The two turn around, surprised, not knowing Lucian was there. The girl feels embarrassed as things have gotten complicated. The girl asks at least for Minghee to add her on WeChat to talk later. Lucian interrupts, saying that the protagonist's phone is in for repair, so it won't be possible. The girl looks disappointed and asks if she can at least get his number. Lucian interrupts again, saying that the protagonist's SIM card is broken, so he doesn't have a number. Minghee is left confused by everything happening. The girl just replies that it's fine and walks away from the two. Minghee and Lucian start walking, and the protagonist asks how Lucian knew he needed a new phone, as his old one is getting really slow. Lucian responds that for a girl to get so excited about him, it means he passed the admission exam without many problems. The protagonist replies that it's pretty much that, but he never imagined his opponent would be their old friend Kai. And apparently Kai went easy on him. She turns, surprised, asking if it really was him as the opponent, and says that Kai was always targeting the protagonist. Minghee jokes, saying that some people who seem evil are just a pretty face without any intelligence. They both start laughing, and Lucian congratulates him, saying they will be classmates again. Minghee agrees. They continue walking outdoors, now that Minghee's life will change again as he becomes a student once more. He observes the vast training field on the grass. He also sees the lively street for students. He even visits the enormous library of the old school building. At this moment, he is in the introductory combat basics class. The professor explains that regarding combat powers, everyone will have some basic ability. He explains that the basic knowledge to have is the division of the 5 ranks: White Dust, Blue Spirit, Purple Soul, Red Honor, and Black Saint. Zhang, the current professor, asks the students if they know what basic ability someone with the White Dust rank has. He asks the girl in front of him to answer. The girl, Nianrong, responds that a person with the White Dust rank will have a different physique than normal, potentially even exceeding the limits of some athletes if they train diligently. The professor confirms that she is correct and explains the differences of each, starting with strength, like someone doing weightlifting. There is also speed, like an athlete in a race, and there is precision, like archery athletes. The professor continues explaining that athletes have the limits of the human body. However, the extraordinaries can surpass these limits. This is the basics of a White Dust rank, which they call super physique. The professor makes it clear that there are individual differences. One White Dust may focus on speed, while another may focus on strength. He says that normally the standard of that institute is focused on strength, speed, reflexes, and real combat. It's important for everyone to meet these requirements. A student stands up and tells the professor that a colleague of his reached the White Dust rank, and that person's strength and reflexes met the standard. He asks why that person didn't achieve a higher rank. That question catches Minghee's attention. The professor responds that they were indeed going to talk about that, as they will discuss the Blue Spirit rank. He mentions that everyone there probably knows the abilities of the Blue Spirit rank. Zhang gets serious and says that, in any case, he will explain the details. He says that a person of this rank, besides having the super physique of the White Dust, also has another type of special power, and asks a student to give a demonstration. A girl with white hair stands up and asks if she can be the example. She says her power is blinding light, and her spirit art is blindness, so everyone there will be able to feel it. The professor asks everyone to close their eyes, but then remembers they won't be able to see the power, so he asks the girl to release just a weak light. She agrees. She raises her arm and a light starts to appear in her hand. The girl comments that she can control the intensity of the blinding light. She immediately closes her hand, covering the glow. Then she opens it again, and a stronger light fills the room, making everyone turn away their gazes. Minghee also shields his eyes, as the light is very bright. The girl says not to panic, just close your eyes, and your vision will recover in a minute or two. Minghee continues shielding himself from the light, as the professor explains to all the students that this is an example of explosive spirit art. The professor explains that not only do those in the blue spirit rank have super physique, but they also possess a type of spirit art, something like an explosive force that can inflict significant damage on the enemy and can have unexpected effects as well. The girl remains standing, pleased to be able to show her power to everyone. The professor continues his explanation, saying that using spirit arts consumes a lot of physical and mental power. He further explains that the blue spirit rank is far superior to white dust, but cultivating super physique is still essential. Another student asks the professor to talk about the purple soul rank. The professor responds that essentially, those in the purple soul rank have more than just the super physique of white dust and the arts of the blue spirits. The confused student says that there probably aren't many people of the purple soul rank at the institute. The professor takes out his notebook and says that the purple soul rank is complicated to explain, as it has different prerequisites. For example, some powers can be used when the person's life is in danger, and other soul arts are connected to spirit arts. The professor lifts a flash drive and says that he recently received a recording of a real combat that took place during the admission exam, which includes the appearance of a soul art. He asks the student near the wall to lower the blinds and turn off the lights. He then projects the video on the screen and informs the students that the face of the person recorded has been censored since all the materials don't have the person's direct permission, so there will be censorship. Minghee feels relieved by this, knowing that it is his fight against Kai, but he doesn't want to become famous too soon. The students are shocked by the power of that supreme soul art hurricane fist. They feel as if everything is going to be destroyed by the wind, and it is extremely frightening. Neonrong looks to the side, finding the video strange, and asks why the person in the video looks so much like the protagonist. The professor rewinds the video a bit and asks everyone to pay attention, saying that Kai's power is battle wind. He shows the ability Kai used at the beginning of the battle. The professor explains that this power is of the wind type and is a prerequisite to showing the soul art, since the power needs to reach a certain intensity. That explanation catches Minghee's attention. He thinks he understands. Basically, when he used his fists to disperse the vortices, Kai was not able to show his soul art. Essentially, the chances of defeating him were higher than the protagonist imagined. The white-haired girl shouts that the person in the video will be destroyed by the wind. Other students shout, asking who is capable of withstanding such power. They see the immense power that the protagonist used against the giant tornado and shout, asking if that person is even human. Neonrong shouts that the person in the video dispersed the tornado just by punching it, and that it was a mini version of a natural disaster. Neonrong continues to be intrigued by this and looks again at Minghee, finding it very suspicious. The professor emphasizes that the person in the video only used a spirit art. Essentially, that art can absorb any conductor around, making a mere spirit art extremely more powerful as it fights against something more powerful. One of the students has a doubt and asks the professor if a purple soul art isn't at least 10 times more powerful than a spirit art. Then how was the person in the video able to do that? Zhang responds that there are 2 factors. First, the white dust foundation of the person in the video is very solid, as the person achieved the top 3 scores in the 3 tests. He recalls all the tests that Minghee took, which were for strength, speed, and evasion. The professor goes on to explain that, as he mentioned earlier, the white dust rank gives a strong physique to the user, and they will have this training within 2 days. He also explains that the more stable the physique, the stronger the spirit art will be. He explains that this is why they are not measured only by the common standards like white dust, blue spirit, purple soul, red honor, and black saint. Essentially, a white dust who has trained their physique to the extreme can even defeat an extraordinary black saint. The students in the classroom get excited and ask who the person in that recording is, thinking that person could probably defeat everyone in the classroom at the same time. Neonrong keeps looking at the protagonist, who pretends not to understand. The surprised student in the video says that the person only used the power of spirit art. So, if that person used soul art, they could probably destroy a small mountain. The professor closes the notebook and says he has finished the explanations about real combat and hopes everyone understood the purpose of it. Zhang sees everyone smiling and explains that the limit of a person is not determined by their rank. Regardless of their rank, every inch of power counts in a combat situation. Mingyi continues listening to these explanations. The professor raises his finger and says that if it weren't like this, even the highest ranks would be easily destroyed. After saying this, he informs them that the class has ended. Everyone then goes outside the academy. Nianrong follows Minghe, trying to talk to him. She gathers courage and calls out to the protagonist. He turns around and sees that it's Nianrong. She asks if the person who fought in that recording the professor showed was him. Mingyi is surprised since the video was heavily censored and asks how she identified it was him. She replies that he wasn't a student at the institute when he was on the train, so that was a clue. Nianrong says that he's in the same class as her, so the only possibility is that he passed the special admission exam. Mingyi says there were others who also passed that special admission. Nianrong responds that it's fine, but she remembers very well the protagonist using his fists when he attacked that demon in the mist. Minghe, feeling awkward, says that many people use their fists, thinking of the powerful Saitama. At this moment, the protagonist asks them to be silent because someone is shouting something. He hears an announcement telling all citizens to be careful because the astronomy team identified a small meteor passing through the atmosphere. The announcement can be heard throughout the city. It warns that the meteor's trajectory is estimated to head towards Shaoling, Nandu. It advises everyone to evacuate and the commanders to prepare for battle. The two look serious as they listen to the important announcement. At that moment, both Nianrong's and the protagonist's phones ring. She answers, and the person informs her that she has been selected as a member of the support team and asks if she heard the astronomy team's warning. Nianrong says it's fine and asks if there are any instructions to pass on. Meanwhile, Mingyi answers his phone and sees that Luo Lin is calling. Luo Lin informs the protagonist that approximately 1,000 calamity monsters are estimated to be in the meteor. She also says that the front line will probably handle it, but the Dragon Fang group needs to be on standby for possible emergencies. Mingyi says he understands the situation and asks where he should go. She replies that as a member of the Dragon Fang, he will be responsible for emergency plans. She asks him to stay on standby and not leave the city or accept missions in the next few days. He steps away from Nianrong while responding on the phone that he understands the order. Mingyi goes to the institute's dormitory. When he arrives, he hears some people talking, asking why Li Jin is so arrogant. One of the people is Yuan, who asks another student if Li Jin is just part of the rescue team. Another student named Wang Dia tells him not to worry since they're all roommates. They notice that Minghe has finally returned. The protagonist comments that he arrived a few days late, so he is out of the loop. He asks what it means to be a preparatory student. Wang Jia says that usually it is the astronomy team that warns of incoming calamities, but this time it's the government, hunters, civilians, and institutes that will take action. Basically, calamities above grade 5 are sent to all 4 teams. He further explains that he came from a small town, so there weren't many calamity occurrences, but in Nandu, things are different. He says the city is home to the institutes, so becoming a student in preparation is a great achievement. At this moment, someone stands up. It's Yuan, saying that the cool part of becoming a preparation member is that you might never actually encounter a monster. He then smiles and says that his older brother is one of the main forces who usually goes to the crater and ends up fighting monsters face to face. Li Ji, on the other hand, is merely a member of the preparation team who does odd jobs for the main frontline team. Wang Jia is surprised and asks if his brother is really that powerful. He also mentions hearing that the frontline people receive luxurious treatments and even have a butler helping with the cleaning. Yuan responds that this is obviously true. He points to the window and asks everyone to look in the direction of some fancy apartment complexes. Basically, that's where the frontline team lives. Looking at that place, Yuan says he was strolling in the afternoon and saw the famous goddess of Nandu heading there. And since she appears to be on the front line, she probably lives in those apartments. The protagonist asks who this goddess of Nandu they are talking about is. Wang Jia is shocked to see that Minghe really doesn't know, since everyone there, and even outside of Nandu, knows the goddess, who, by the way, are 3 goddesses. He smiles and says he will tell who the 3 goddesses are. One is the icy princess named Teng Ning. Another is Feng Ling, considered the saint of martial arts. And lastly, the dancing thunder girl, Lu Qian, Minghee is surprised to hear all that, and asks why these people have such wild and exaggerated titles. Wang Jia smiles and says that people gave these titles based on their powers, and everyone agrees that the titles suit them. The protagonist jokes, saying that this means he was carried by Lu Qian since, after all, she is his classmate in high school. Wang Jia, clearly not believing this nonsense, asks him to also say that Lu Qian is his girlfriend. Yuan, smiling, says that all the boys in the institute call the three goddesses their waifus. The protagonist tries to say that Lu Qian really is his classmate. His colleagues ask him not to use this as a reason to be in the room facing the girls' dormitory, especially since if he really knows Lu Qian, why can't he even win against the entire girls' dormitory? The protagonist says it's okay and starts to leave, saying he's going to his room. He sits on the bed and begins to meditate, concentrating deeply to enter his thoughts. Finally, he arrives at the goddess's temple. Standing before her, he asks who his opponent will be that day. She looks intently at the protagonist and then begins to stretch, saying that, at this moment, the mutant Zhao is no longer an adequate opponent for him. She invokes her system and says she needs him to encounter new monsters so she can get more information. That's the only way she can create new simulated opponents. Otherwise, she can't just invent them. He says that recently there was an invasion in Shaoling, and there must be a large group of monsters there. The goddess says it's interesting for him to check it out. The protagonist just lowers his head and says that unfortunately, he is only a reinforcement, so he can't interfere unnecessarily. The goddess says that he doesn't need to visit her for now. After all, without new information for her to create new opponents, it doesn't make sense for him to continue practicing. He tries to explain that apparently he needs to join the preparation team to get in contact with some enemies. The goddess asks if he is not a hunter. In that case, he can take some private jobs to increase his experience. He becomes thoughtful, realizing that he will have to wait for the Dragon Tooth's waiting phase to end. The goddess, with the protagonist's system open, mentions that his second dominant power space has been unlocked and that he needs to find a way to obtain the Drop of Life to unlock the second type of power. He is surprised to hear about the second dominant space and the Drop of Life, recalling that it is something that can make him even more powerful. She responds that it can be obtained from the leader of the demonic lair, or of course, he could buy it if he had a lot of money. He feels disheartened, since having money is out of the question for him. The goddess smiles and says that the rich rely on technology, while the poor rely on mutation. She also mentions that thanks to his luck ability, he was able to meet her. The goddess says that some were bitten by a spider, or struck by lightning, thus gaining incredible powers in the universe. The protagonist says he was struck by a meteorite and needs to level up each time, so this powerful goddess could give him a full rank-up gift. She asks him not to be ridiculous, pointing out that what she said was taken from movies. Minghee starts warming up and says that since he's going to be idle anyway, she could create some opponents for him to fight. She gets annoyed and tells him not to be so obsessed with cultivation. She asks if he doesn't go to university meetups or just go out to have fun. After all, he is new to the area and has a lot to explore. The protagonist gets serious and says that there really is something about the campus. He picks up a black mask from the floor and puts it on, saying that there is something he's wanted to check out for a while. He goes to the free training field, saying that there he can find opponents to practice with. The goddess can't believe it and says that this guy is definitely a cultivation maniac. The protagonist places his jacket over the sign that informs that spirit arts are prohibited in that place. He finds an opponent who says that his fists are dangerous. Minghee says he understands and asks to start. The opponent grits his teeth and charges at him. He begins to throw numerous punches, but the protagonist dodges them all with extreme ease. He thought that this fight didn't even compare to all the simulated opponents, so he treated it as a warm-up. At that same moment, in Field 3, another fight was happening. Feng Ling was fighting a projected mutant. She landed a solid kick on it, sending it flying. Immediately she jumped and prepared to deliver another blow. Then, she landed a strong punch, making the monster hit the ground. The lion-shaped monster, there to assist in training, lamented, saying that the student didn't know how to go easy. Feng Ling landed back on the ground with her slender body, asking who would be next. At that moment, she was also wearing a mask to disguise herself among everyone, as she was quite popular. She turned to one side and asked one of the two to come fight her. The two just trembled with fear. Then she turned to the other side, and immediately people fled from there. She then turned her back and saw that everyone was fleeing, so they wouldn't have to fight her. She felt a pang of sadness, as it seemed she wouldn't be able to train anymore. She decided to return to where her trainer was. Upon arrival, she said she hadn't even broken a sweat that day. The man in the hat in charge of training her said that the people there were weaklings compared to her, and now he was even calling her the Phoenix Girl of martial arts. Feng Ling said she didn't care about those nicknames. She was just sad because she used to be able to warm up there, but nowadays she couldn't even do that. The trainer said it was because she was progressing too fast, and mentioned that he saw an interesting guy in Field 1, suggesting she go take a look. She turned and asked him to forget it, as she was no longer interested. However, she decided to take a look, and was surprised to see the two fighting. Ming-He dodges a blow with ease. He grabs his opponent's arm and kicks his leg. His opponent falls hard to the ground without any chance. He just cries, as he couldn't even touch the protagonist. Feng Ling, having just watched the fight, says she has changed her mind. She starts removing her jacket, saying that the martial arts of that guy are quite interesting, so he should last at least 2 or 3 minutes. Her trainer comments that it's hard to say, but from what he saw in the fight, he believes it will last longer. Feng Ling asks if he doesn't believe in her, and proposes a bet. If she can't win in 3 minutes, she will submit to any training her trainer wants. He agrees. She walks up to the protagonist and tells him they will have a round. Ming-He finds this interesting. Both prepare to start the fight. She immediately runs at full speed, surprising the protagonist with her speed. She aims a flying kick at his head, which he barely dodges. She then delivers another powerful kick, which he also avoids, as she goes past him with all her momentum. She praises his reflexes, saying they are really good. The protagonist replies that she is not far behind him either. This time, the protagonist decides to attack and rushes at her, throwing a punch which she defends against. Despite her defense, she is pushed back. Feng Ling starts sweating a bit and says the fight is really good. She immediately jumps and says it's time to finish this, preparing her most powerful kick. Ming-He finds it interesting and starts gathering energy in his fist. The two collide with their powerful moves, her descending moon kick and his ascending dragon punch. The impact creates a massive air explosion across the field. Spectators around them comment that the two fighters seem like maniacs, not even human. The protagonist decides to put more power into his punch, forcing Feng Ling to jump back upon realizing this. She lands on the ground, and her trainer informs her that 3 minutes have passed. Feng Ling looks worried, having felt the punch in her leg. Excited, she admits he is very strong and regrets underestimating him. The protagonist also admits he underestimated her and suggests they go again. He quickly jumps and starts running at full speed, declaring that he will attack this time. He unleashes a flurry of punches, calling them windstorm punches. Feng Ling activates her swift shadow, dodging all his punches. She immediately jumps back, realizing she needs to take the initiative somehow. He quickly notices her retreat and rushes toward her, surprising her with his speed. The two start exchanging blows, causing several air explosions on the field. A spectator remarks that it's impossible to see their movements, yet they seem to be in harmony with their speed, strength, and reflexes. At this moment, Yuan's phone rings. He decides to answer to find out what's going on. He immediately shouts, calling Feng Ling, and says an urgent mission has come up. She quickly stops fighting. The spectators, unaware it was Feng Ling, are in awe of being in the presence of one of the Institute's goddesses. She turns to the protagonist and says something urgent has come up, so she needs to leave, but they can fight another time. She mentions she's there every Wednesday morning. He responds that it's okay. She goes to her uncle to get her phone and informs him that she'll arrive at the mission location soon. She starts running and tells her trainer she forgot to ask the name of the student she fought and asks him to take care of that for her. But everyone looks around and sees that the student has already disappeared without a trace. Ming-He walks through the institute, marveling at how incredible it is, noting even a random girl is so fierce. He looks up at the sky, wondering what her name was, as there were so many people on the field, and it was so noisy he couldn't hear properly. At this moment, the television announces that thanks to the efforts of the 4 teams, the red-eyed demon has been defeated. In the news report, there is a special thanks to all 13 students from the Nandu Institute who made significant contributions. Yuan grins broadly and asks everyone to look at the person on television, saying it's his brother Zhang Tu. Wang Jia is surprised and wants to see if it's true. He looks and is amazed, saying that one day he wants to be on television too. Yuan turns to Li Jin and asks if he really has the qualifications to be on the front line and still do odd jobs. Li Jin wonders why Yuan is being so bold and tells him that it's his brother being praised, so it has nothing to do with him. This makes Yuan extremely furious. His friend asks him to calm down, reminding him that they are all roommates. He takes the opportunity to ask if everyone has packed their things. Yuan asks, "Packed for what?" He explains that there will be wilderness training, which is similar to military training and mandatory for all freshmen. Yuan laments, saying he really forgot. Wang Jia takes the opportunity to ask Minghe if he is ready for it. The protagonist replies that he is ready, saying this while seeing Lu Qian on television, receiving thanks for the mission's success. Back in the classroom, the professor asks everyone to pay attention to the training plan that has been decided. Looking at the students, he says they have chosen Shaoling as the wilderness training field. One of the girls asks why it has to be a place with many mosquitoes and insects. Another girl asks if a battle just happened in that city. The professor makes it clear that this is not a fall trip, but training. He informs them that, according to the news, the red demons in Shaoling have summoning abilities. Basically, their incubation has a rapid growth rate. He says that although the adult demons have been eliminated, the demon eggs in Shaoling pose a huge danger to all the local residents. The professor informs that this responsibility falls to the freshmen who have never set foot in society. One of the students protests, saying there's no way they're doing it, accusing the government of dumping the dirty work on them. The professor makes it clear that Shaoling needs to be 100% safe, and this is the duty of the extraordinaries. He also states that if any red demon appears, it must be reported to the government immediately. Yuan gets excited, saying that finding a red demon will earn him a lot of merit. Wang Jia finds it strange, since freshmen with little experience against real demons should start with odd jobs. The professor announces that the class hasn't chosen a leader yet, and recommends Nianrong, since she performed excellently in the combat team and received high praise from the superiors. He looks at her and asks if anyone objects to her being the leader. He also says that the other 4 members of the class committee will be chosen based on their performances. Everyone then heads outside the institute as they are dismissed from the meeting. The protagonist checks his phone and notices a missed call from Lu Qian. He decides to call back and apologizes, informing her that the class just ended. She says she is at the cafeteria and asks if he wants to join her there. The protagonist agrees. His 2 friends observe the conversation. Wang Jia says he heard a girl's voice coming from the phone and never imagined that Minghe had a girlfriend. He responds that she is just a classmate and not a girlfriend. His other friend says that the girl on the phone was being too kind, so it's not just a friendship. The protagonist insists that there is nothing more, and he has already fallen into the friend zone. They ask why the girl would invite him to the cafeteria if it's really just friendship. The protagonist replies that despite everything, they can still be friends. His friends joke, saying they imagined the protagonist had a girlfriend, but in the end, he's just simping. They also ask who this friend is, and suggest that it's the imaginary friend Lu Qian, laughing at the impossibility of it. Minghe hands over a notebook, saying it really is Lu Qian, and that he is going to see what she wants. He shouts, asking his friends to take the book back to the dorm. Wang Jia says they should follow Minghe to see where he's going, as none of them have anything to do. Yuan thinks it's a great idea. They ask Li Jin if he's coming. Li Jin says he's going back to read, and that he doesn't want to live in the dorm with all that trash next semester. Yuan gets furious upon hearing this and tries to go after Li Jin, calling him trash. Wang Jia tells him to forget it, reminding him they are on a mission to follow Minghe and can't lose sight of him. The 2 start walking, eager to see Minghe with a girl, whoever she may be. Meanwhile, in the cafeteria, the protagonist is talking with Lu Qian. He mentions seeing her on TV receiving praise. She says the veterans were really strong, and she was just there to contribute. Worried, he asks if she got hurt during the mission. She says no. He smiles and says it's a relief to hear that. The protagonist then asks if she was looking for him because of something urgent. Embarrassed, she says no. It's nothing special. She's been puzzled since Minghe joined the institute because he hasn't called her once and has been acting strangely. She wonders if they are really in a relationship, as she thinks they are. She then mentions that the freshmen are going for training, and the institute asked her to join as an assistant. At this moment, Wang Jia and Yuan are hiding at another table, trying to see who Minghe is talking to. Lu Qian says she will join them in Shaoling when the time comes. At this point, they can't believe Minghe was telling the truth. Lu Qian really is his classmate. The protagonist smiles and says that's good, as they'll get to see each other more often. Embarrassed, she asks if they should watch a movie together. Since she spent 10 days on the front line, a colleague suggested a movie would help her psychologically. Minghe's friends can't believe what they're hearing. Lu Qian, the goddess, is taking the initiative to suggest watching a movie. The protagonist smiles and says it's a good idea. He can even recommend a good comedy. She, embarrassed, asks if he'll be busy. He replies that it's just training, nothing special. Lu Qian shyly asks if he wants to watch a movie with her. He says it sounds nice. Wang Jia and Yuan are shocked by Minghe's responses. They can't believe how humble Lu Qian is with him. The protagonist stands up, saying a friend always calls him a cultivation maniac, so it's time to rest. He invites her to leave, and she agrees. Minghee's friends tremble, unable to believe what they're witnessing. Minghee and Luqian leave the cafeteria together. His two friends remain, trembling in disbelief. They tear up the menu, shouting that they can't believe what's happening. They despair, as Luqian called Minghee, invited him for a drink, and then to a movie. It seems she's hitting on him, which is too surreal. The day the freshmen go to Shaoling arrives. They are walking while civilians thank them for being there. Nianrong calls for Minghee, saying the professor wants to see him. The protagonist runs to the superiors. He informs the dean, who is the vice president of the Rong Courtyard, and Director Shu, the head of the combat course. The protagonist greets the dean. The dean mentions that a military instructor is looking for him and asks him to go there immediately. Minghee agrees and runs to the military instructor. As he approaches, he notices Luo Lin calling him. The protagonist smiles, saying he didn't expect her to be there. She replies that she instructs the freshmen every year in this training. It's like a vacation for her after exhausting battles. He asks if there are any special instructions. Luo Lin responds that no. Besides training for wild combat and survival, their main priority is to keep the freshmen safe. She also tells the protagonist that she is well aware of his abilities, and as a member of the Dragon Tooth, he is more than qualified to be an instructor for those freshmen. He feels embarrassed hearing this. Luo Lin tells the protagonist that she understands he wants to enjoy university life, so she won't expose his abilities. Additionally, due to all the rush, she hasn't had the chance to explain the current situation to him. He asks what situation she is referring to. She explains that it's about the Dragon Tooth. She needed to talk about the extent of his authority. She adds that it seems the protagonist is unaware that the Dragon Tooth is not just any organization. She says that many super soldiers would kill to join the organization, but many don't even know how to fill out an application. He becomes interested and asks her to tell him more about it. She begins by explaining that his authority is above Group B, meaning he has command power over the executive district he is in. He has the right to reserve a team from the institute and government to follow his expeditions. If frontline members are under his command, they are obligated to follow his orders. The protagonist asks what this executive district is. She replies that it's the district where he is executing a mission. She cites Shaoling as an example, saying it's his current executive district. Minghee says he is not under any order. She clarifies that she is explaining this now. He responds that it makes sense now. Luo Lin explains that he has two missions this time. First, ensuring the safety of the students. This is the top priority, especially as part of the Dragon Tooth. He says that won't be a problem, as he would do it even if he weren't part of the organization. He then asks what the second mission is. She smiles and says that for now, he doesn't need to know the second mission. She will explain it later when they arrive at the location. Minghee says he understands and asks if he should return to the team formation. Luo Lin says yes and asks him to keep his membership in the Dragon Tooth a secret, at least for now. He agrees, saying it's better for him as he doesn't like drawing attention. Everyone finally reaches the top of the mountain. A blonde girl says she thought they were going to a farm, but this is even worse as they seem to be in the middle of nowhere. Additionally, the cell signal is weak there, so she wonders how they will survive. The professor informs everyone that camping is a basic skill they need to learn from the instructors, as it will be essential. One of the boys is smitten upon seeing Luqian there. Other boys run, shouting for the goddess. Several boys approach Luqian, telling her how wonderful she is. She doesn't understand anything, as she was just helping set up a tent. The protagonist finishes setting up a tent and says he now needs to apply insect repellent. At this moment, someone starts spreading burnt ashes on the ground. It's instructor Juchi, who explains that this is the line for wild animals. He says animals have a keen sense of smell, so if they smell something burnt, they will retreat. The blonde girl asks why they, as extraordinaries, would be afraid of wild animals. The instructor explains that animals can mutate after eating the flesh of scourges. He mentions that he once saw a mutant bear 10 meters tall. He continues spreading ashes around the camp. The instructor also explains that although the mission is a group effort, it's possible for someone to end up alone during the mission, and these details are important for that person to save themselves if necessary. Several students start making fires to create these ashes. One of the girls asks the instructor about the scariest experience she ever had. Lulin recounts that it was definitely when they encountered an emperor scourge. She looks at the fire and says that at that time, she was just a student. Lulin recounts that she was horrified when she witnessed it. They were more than 10 kilometers away from the monster, yet it seemed like an enormous mountain. Everyone in the city thought the mountains were moving. She describes how the city was devastated, becoming a nest for the scourges, but fortunately most of the citizens evacuated in time. A girl asks what the exact rank of that scourge was. Lulin replies that it was Emperor rank. The white-haired girl from the protagonist class asks if humans really managed to defeat such a monster. Lulin explains that several super leaders were sacrificed in that battle, including one from the Nandu Institute. The professor stands up and asks all the students to go to sleep, as the battle to clear the battlefield will begin the next day. After everyone goes to sleep, the day dawns, and the professor shouts for everyone to wake up, asking them to divide into 10 small groups based on their ranks. A beautiful woman with purple hair announces that the instructors will lead all the groups for a morning run and then return for breakfast. All the students are amazed by her beauty. She turns to some students and says she will be responsible for their group, which includes the protagonist. This beautiful woman is Instructor Miaolan. She tells her group that they will have to keep up with her, and those who fall behind will only have toast for breakfast that day. Everyone in the group says it won't be a problem since they are extraordinaires with great physical abilities. She informs them that throughout the course there will be an assistant or professor, so those who fall behind can finish the course with them. She positions herself and then starts running at full speed, telling everyone in her group to follow her. They all run into the forest. She keeps running at full speed, dodging obstacles, and reaches a hill, jumping down and asking everyone to follow her path. She reaches the ground, always maintaining high speed. The protagonist is always a few meters behind her. Miaolan places her hand on the ground and starts running again, observing how many students are keeping up with her and how many are falling behind. She keeps running until she spots a stream. She leaps across the stones in the water while 4 group members are close behind her. The instructor, Mingge, and Nyanrong are in the lead, with 2 other students close behind, still jumping over the stones. The rest of the students finally reach the stream, but struggle to cross it. They continue running up the mountain. Suddenly, the instructor decides to stop. Legion, extremely tired, asks why she stopped and urges her to continue, saying they can do it. Miaolan says that the 4 of them can keep up with her, but the others are taking a bit longer, so they can wait here and rest. She notices that of the 4, 3 are extremely tired and sweating profusely, but one of them shows no signs of exhaustion or sweating at all. Some time passes, and the students gradually reach the top of the mountain. They shout that they finally made it after so much effort. Liangdong laughs, saying they waited 5 minutes for everyone to arrive. The students say they are dying and can't run anymore. Miaolan smiles and says that most of the students have arrived, so they can continue running. They look at the sky and beg to rest a little longer since they are exhausted. They return to the camp. The instructor says that breakfast isn't ready yet, so they will have to take a break first. Nyanrong looks at all the people who have arrived and comments that the class has many exceptional students since they adapted easily to the morning run. Legion says it was to be expected, as they are the best students from their hometowns.
If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and like the video. Thank you.